Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
О, бля! Игорь!
Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 409 of the news, and it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine as unidentified missiles from an unknown direction, although there is still a lot of guessing and a lot of information coming out on this, have struck the small port city of Feodosia on the southeastern end of the Crimean peninsula near the Kerch Strait. We'll be covering that a little bit later on in the news because we actually are going to be going onto the open and wide internet to try and see if we can find any additional information about this, because right before this stream, we spent about an hour doing something else, and we were not able to really catch up on the news of this little occurrence incredibly well. So we will be making a special exception for that tonight, but it is now time for us to be getting into the news itself. And starting off, we're going to be starting in the area of Russia, the beautiful Russian Federation, where you can find many alcoholics. It is almost like, let me think. I don't know. It's almost like a bonfire at your local high school, but in the middle of this local bonfire type setting at your nearest high school, in the city of Tver, which is just north of Moscow by about 50 miles, we saw that a Russian general had a meltdown today and started cussing out conscripts on recording. It was very, very interesting to watch. In fact, I would say that the cussing out was a very interesting look into the insights on the Russian military and how weak they may really be. And so, with that, here's the video. And of course, I'll be reading off the translation. Oh, and you can hear the anger in his voice already. But anyways, let's start it off. To shame Odessa! To shame its name! To shame the Russian weapon! I'm from South Ossetia. My last position is the president of South Ossetia. I am here next to you. What for? I graduated from the Ryazan Airborne School. I served in the 76th Division. Do you realize or not? Do you understand or not? Do you understand what step you are taking? No! You have to think with your head, guys. And how are you going to look at those guys who are now performing combat missions at the front line 1,300 kilometers away? Your countrymen from the same city. Comrade General, can I say something? My brother was killed in a car crash. My parents were in a terrible state. And now my parents will find out that it ended up in the same place. Everything is done individually. I will have to go and bury them. Everything is done individually. And am I talking to the team that is gathered here? Why are you afraid? What for? Quiet! Quiet! We are soldiers, and we serve our motherland. They're taking us where they take us. We have to feel our motherland. Matthew, it sounds like he is going to be going the same route as, I'm fighting for my freaking life, man! Because he said, we will have to feel our motherland. We won't just fight for the motherland. We're gonna feel the motherland. We need to start playing that song, you know? Boop, 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 boop. You know the one I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Anyways, we're gonna let it keep on going. Quiet! Quiet! We are not guys. You're under the command of the 3rd Army Corps. Instructors at the training grounds, because they are experienced soldiers, and they will tell you what they know to save your lives, or to end them. Where is the order of the commander of the 3rd Army Corps? The order of the commander of the 3rd Army Corps, you have a list of personnel. There is no list of personnel. Attention, listen to me, I'm listening. You have to bring them to the headquarters of the 3rd Army Corps today so that they can be placed at ease in the 3rd Army Corps. Right, where's the order? Until you bring the list, what order can there be? The order to move to China. Do you have the accompanying documents that should be there? No.
В корпусе третьем.
In the 3rd Army Corps? No.
Нету.
Who is not there?
Нас забрали военные билеты.
We were taken away. Absolutely right.
Военные билеты
The military
забрали
tickets were
у
taken
всех,
from
которые
everyone who came
поступили
today.
сегодня. 5 человек рядом с вами выехало.
20 people left with you.
Забрали документы,
They took the
военные
military
билеты для
documents in
того,
order to put a
чтобы
stamp that you were
печати,
transferred to the 3rd Army
что вы
Corps.
перемещены в 3-й армейский корпус.
So, we're going to be cutting this short right here because this is an entire nearly 8-minute long rant from this general to the 3rd Army Corps that's currently stationed in Tver. And to summarize what's going on here, because it doesn't really come about quite easily in the dialogue, is that the 3rd Army Corps is actually under the command of the Eastern Group. And so it is actually supposed to be sent onto border patrol near Manchuria and on the Chinese border. However, when they arrived at the station in Tver, all of their transport tickets to be heading to China as the 3rd Army Corps were taken away, and they're now most likely going to be sent towards Ukraine. And that's why one of the soldiers at the beginning was talking about, my brothers died, we're going to have to bury them, and now I'm going to the same place, because with their tickets being confiscated, the entire corps that this general is talking to is thinking that they're about to be sent to Ukraine, which they actually are. The 3rd Army Corps is going to be sent to Ukraine. So that is kind of the spiel in the best way possible to describe it as what's going on here. Of course, if you want to see the entire phone call, you can go to the link in the description below where we have the day 409 map clearly laid out with all of the links. You can go to this one in Tver, just north of Moscow, and click on it and listen to the entire phone call without my translation, and also listening to the soldiers and generals speak themselves. But as you can see, it appears
Man, he ought to write a book on how not to lead soldiers. I have a feeling that happens a lot more than we know.
Oh, a whole lot more than we know for sure. And this guy, also, you can tell how little authority and control a Russian general really has when they have to act like that to have a feeling that the conscripts will follow in line with what they're saying. It shows that the I guess you could say the reality of their control over their own army corps like that one is probably very little. And that's why he's acting like that, because the only way to try and get the corps to follow orders is to threaten them with fear, pretty much fear for their lives with how this guy is acting, that they'll pretty much be shot on the spot if they contradict what they're saying and what they're doing. But anyways, that was a little bit of a glimpse into life in the Russian army. And meanwhile, life in the Russian Volunteer Corps, also made up of Russians, appears to be a little bit better, as we actually got a clip of a radio call made yesterday by the Russian Volunteer Corps that had crossed just 1.5 miles across the border into the Bryansk Oblast, and it appears that from what they were saying, it must have gone well. Although we don't have video evidence of what they're saying specifically, this is an a radio call, I guess you could say, from that from the Russian Volunteer Corps. And so with that, here is the clip. We can see the Russian Volunteer Corps' emblem, very interesting, neat one. And we now see them saying Bryansk Oblast in the Zaporozhye barracks. We now see an explosion right there, which they'll be talking about in a second. We see some more explosions as the Russian Volunteer Corps attacks the barracks. One border guard was killed there, and the border guard Evgeny was wounded in Zaporozhye. Intel from Zaporozhye. Tons of ambulances. They've destroyed the border guard's soldiers. They were stationed somewhere there in Zaporozhye, or maybe somewhere near Zaporozhye. I don't know who died, but they saw there's a ton of wounded. There's lots of ambulances there. They've been hit hard. And so this intercepted phone call is describing what the Russian Volunteer Corps did the other day, and we can also see a little bit of video footage of it there at the start as they attacked a Russian border guard's barracks on the Ukrainian border near the Bryansk Oblast. Apparently, from what we were able to get in the call, one of these border guards, the Russian border guards, was killed in this attack, and many more were wounded as a large amount of Russian ambulances showed up in the morning the following day and are apparently collecting all of the wounded Russians to then take them to a hospital, most likely in Bryansk City, which is a pretty good drive away, actually. It's probably about 3 hours drive. But still, it is showing that the Russian Volunteer Corps is certainly going to start causing a lot of problems, being a huge thorn in the Russian military side, as they're now going to have to probably divert proper regular Russian forces from the front lines here in the south and to the east, and most likely across the Ukrainian border, to try and at least stop or attempt to stop these attacks by the Russian Volunteer Corps, which is apparently causing a good bit of damage to the border guards themselves. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little bit of news, and I'm also going to be making sure that we do not have any additional international news. And we're now going to be moving on down into Mykolaiv, and I thought we would start tonight with a little bit of a positive story. Actually, this is a really positive story, because just the other day, we were showing some of the atrocities and war crimes that were committed by the Russians that were committed on the E40 Zhytomyr highway during the Battle of Kiev about a year ago at this exact time. In fact, it's over a year ago at this point, because the Russians withdrew from the northern area around April 1st and April 2nd, which was a great non-April Fool's joke. It was the legit deal. They left the entire northern region. But a lot of these kids, and a lot of kids that have been in Ukrainian occupied territory, have been separated from their parents, or their parents have been killed, and they were transported into Russia and now live completely detached lives from what they once lived. Luckily, 31 of these kids were returned today. We put the marker down in Mykolaiv. It could really be anywhere inside of the interior of Ukraine. It isn't specifically in Mykolaiv, but we did put the marker here, and we got to see that 31 of these kids were returned home. We don't know what the exact dealings and negotiations were to have these kids brought back to Ukraine, but we can see that they were brought back. It's a beautiful sight, and we can see that folks are crying, hugging their children that they haven't seen for who knows how long, maybe even a year. And who knows what these poor kids have had to go through in Russia. We've seen videos that we haven't really shown on this channel of Ukrainian children being bullied in Russian schools by Russians, having their heads shaved, working in pretty much sweatshops to produce clothing and uniforms for the Russian armed forces. We've seen a lot of things, and it's great to know that 31 of these kids will no longer have to go through things like that inside of Russia, and that they've returned to Ukraine. And I think this is great. Of course, I don't think anyone can disagree that this isn't a great thing, and it's good to know that some Ukrainian children have returned home. As far as I remember, though, there are an estimated 10,000 Ukrainian children that have been kidnapped from Ukraine and transported into Russia and spread out across the entirety of the country. So, of course, it is a small number compared to that, I guess you could say, estimated 10,000 Ukrainian children that are in Russia, but it is a step in the right direction, and hopefully more Ukrainian children will return home as the war goes on, or maybe by the end of the war. With that, we're now going to be moving on into the location unknowns themselves. And what's weird is that usually we are about to go into the location unknowns, or we go over them, and then we get right into the frontline news. We actually had a massive amount of frontline news today, an unbelievable margin, from everywhere just south of Zaporizhia all the way north of Svatove, and we actually were able to get a lot of these markers down, at least as far as showing the Russians, down to almost the exact block and within just a mile of where some of these videos were taken. It's been a very impressive day in this regard, because we've been able to geolocate a good amount of the videos of the Russian positions to be able to say exactly where they are. So make sure to stick around for that, because we'll be going over Russian positions and Russian movements a fairly good deal today. But with that, we're now moving into the location unknowns, and starting off with our first clip showing that the New Testament saved a soldier's life. Now, that sounds really interesting, and a lot of y'all are like, the New Testament is in, like, the Bible? And yes, in a weird enough way, the New Testament literally saved a soldier's life, as a bullet from an AK was fired directly into it, and the thickness of the book stopped the bullet from piercing straight into his heart, as it was kept in a pocket of his uniform right over his heart, literally saving the man's life. And that,
yeah, who'd have known that a Bible could double his body armor?
Who would have known? And what's really crazy about this, and the reason why I wanted to show this one, is not only is it miraculous and ironic in a way that the New Testament saved the guy from getting killed, but there have been a lot of stories like this in the First and Second World Wars, where soldiers would be saved by usually a Bible being placed in the pocket over their hearts. These books are just thick enough, usually, even the pocket versions, they're just thick enough that they are able to usually stop rifle caliber rounds at certain ranges. Of course, close enough it will blow straight through, but that was very lucky on this Ukrainian soldier's part that the bullet was fired directly at his heart and directly at the Bible that rested right over it. Very, very lucky on his end, and I just thought I would share that because who would have ever thought that a New Testament Bible would have actually literally saved someone's life? Very impressive in that margin, and also crazy to see that there's actual picture proof of that Bible now shredded, having taken the bullet, and you can still see the, I guess you could say, the marring right there where the bullet actually pierced into the book. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little clip of Location Unknown news. Very bizarre. We haven't seen anything like that during the war yet. And we're now going to be moving on into our next bit, where we saw a precision artillery strike pulled off by Ukrainian forces. From what we understand, this thing is a 2S3. It's something of an older Soviet artillery piece, and it went up in flames. And we see it sitting here, and any second now, oh, there we go. Oh my God. That thing blew up pretty impressively. I haven't seen an SPG blow up like that in a good while. Also, I forgot, by the way, let me circle back. What is really ironic about the New Testament saving the soldier's life is that it is Easter weekend right now. You know, which is a very important holiday for Christians, and it's crazy to know that the Bible actually saved the guy's life. I forgot about that. That was what was ironic about the whole thing. But anyways, moving back to the SPG, this thing went up. This thing is, I don't know, an immediate campfire or an immediate nuclear bomb. I don't really know how to describe it, but this is pretty impressive. I don't know what the small sparks are. We haven't really seen small sparks like that come out of an SPG exploding before. It may be that the shell went straight through the roof and blew the ammunition straight up out of the top in small fragments, and we're seeing some of the powder burning on parts of the brass as it flies through the air. Very impressive. And quite an explosion. I would have to take a pretty good assumption, Matthew. And of course, we never want to make assumptions unless if they are founded, but I would have to say I don't think the Russian crew in that SPG made it out.
I doubt it. I seriously doubt it.
In the words of James May, so he's not coming on then. And I don't.
No, he's not coming on, James.
I don't think they will be coming on. Even if they are invited. But anyways, with that, we're now going to be moving on into our next bit of Location Unknown news, where we saw that some secret plans were uncovered today, and this comes on top of the Pentagon papers being released to the public. Of course, not supposed to be, and the Pentagon is currently looking into this leak, but we put this into the Location Unknowns because it appears to some Ukrainian soldiers that do not really have Ukraine's interests at heart decided to uncover even more confidential plans of the upcoming counteroffensive. We actually got the exact location and some of the exact units that will be involved. And I was thinking about probably not showing this due to OPSEC reasons, but at the same time, this has been circling around the internet so heavily today, I thought I would show it nonetheless, because it's incredibly important. And so I just want to get everyone ready for this. I'm very sorry, everyone, that these plans came out, but we saw Ukrainian soldiers showing off these plans, and I feel like this will be a goof that they'll never recover from. But anyways, here's the video. When you see Ukrainian
sarcasm,
and we can see right there the Ukrainian battle plans. It appears that there is a dog and a pig, and we can see that they have tanks, helicopters, aircraft, and soldiers advancing from all directions onto these Russian defensive positions, and we can already see that the plans involve them being engulfed in fire, most likely by a HIMARS explosion. I have to say, it is incredibly scary to know that Ukrainian soldiers would publish battle plans like these, because these could jeopardize the entirety of Ukraine's counteroffensive coming up fairly soon. It's very scary. And we can see
I can see it right now. The Russians are going to be taking this photo and saying, "Look, this is the poor planning of the Ukrainians."
And we can see the culprit right here. We can see him, and the Ukrainians need to track this man down, and they need to put him in prison for doing this. This is outrageous that this guy would publish these kinds of sensitive battle plans to the public. I wouldn't believe it unless it was caught on film, and I feel like this certainly needs to be held accountable. Wouldn't you agree, Matthew?
Certainly. And look at that proud look on his face. I've never seen so much pride across a soldier's face as this fellow.
Never.
He is very proud.
He is too proud of what he's done to jeopardize the Ukrainian military in this upcoming counteroffensive. He needs to be spanked thoroughly and then thrown into the prison. But anyways, we're going to be moving on from that location unknown news clip. Of course, it's just a funny gaffe that some Ukrainian soldiers pulled. There's nothing, of course, sensitive on the paper. It's literally a cartoon drawing. But I thought we would make a good riff on it because it was a funny joke, I have to say. And so with that, we're now moving on into our next bit of location unknown news while I sit here and try and handle the coffee that I'm still drinking right now. And we can see that a pigeon is being employed by the Ukrainian military to drop its droppings onto the Russians. Not on windshields, but on the Russians. Today's location unknowns have been fairly comical. I don't know why it was that way today, but there have been a lot of gaffe videos that the Ukrainian armed forces have come out with today. This one's hilarious. The music was also hilarious, but somehow, even with our very strict vetting of muting videos, we have been copyrighted over the past 2 days straight on both of the prior videos. I don't know why. We've been trying to look into where the copyrighted music is, so we have to, of course, mute this one. We can't even play a few seconds of it, otherwise there'll be ads on these streams after they get uploaded as videos. But we can see right here that there is a pigeon that you can put on top of your drone. We can see that it has a pretty good review. And we can see very good reviews on this little pigeon. We can now see that they have gotten the pigeon. They are now going to pull out the drone bomb, or otherwise known as the pigeon droppings. And they are now putting the pigeon plushie, on top of the drone. And they are now going to equip the pigeon with the droppings. We can now see the pigeon clearly flying in the sky, gracefully, much like the, I guess you could say, the flying rats of the city do. And we can, of course, see that it has a big fat dookie under it that it's ready to drop on Russians. We can now see it drop its dropping onto the Russian positions, and lo and behold, it explodes in quite fantastic fashion right over the opening of a bunker. We can now see the pigeon make a slow pan towards the camera and now gracefully flying through the sky. A successful mission and another windshield, Russians that have been smeared. Not the white smear that you usually find on the windshield, however. It is red. Most likely some kind of hydraulic fluid.
I like how that bird's like destabilized the entire drone. It's like wobbling around like a weeble wobble.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That one missed. That one missed at the end, but I guess I gotta say this, Matthew. There could never have been a more appropriate use of this joke right here, but that is the biggest bird. By far.
Well, wait, go back to the beginning of the video. All the way to the beginning. This advertising is accurate. It says in the title, it's a wonky. It's indeed wonky.
That thing wonky. Let's see, what does this say? A Grisha. I don't know what the Grisha is, unfortunately. And it also says, I don't know what any of that says. It says anti-stress. Anti-stress, I believe. I don't know what any of that means, unfortunately. But this word, Grishna, was Grisha was heavily used throughout all of the reviews. So I think that may be the word for pigeon in Ukrainian. I'm not really sure, though. Anyways, we're going to be moving on from that. Of course, it's great to see the biggest bird out there in action. And we're now going to be moving on to our last bit of location unknown news, which is the Russian Casualty Report. And of course, as many of y'all know, oh man, the Casualty Report is climbing. No Bobcat skid steers today, and we can of course see Matthew hitting the sickest gritty as he hops into the cab of this Bobcat skid steer over here in the replies. And I gotta say, hit that gritty, Matthew. Hit that gritty.
Hell yeah. I just realized that it says on the sign right there, it says, "Oh no, I'm the biggest bird. I'm the biggest bird."
And then we can see a Bobcat down here winking. Very nice. For Magic Scargo, nonetheless. And of course, multiple replies. Actually, only 2 today. I thought there would be more. There's only 2. But still, we can see, moving on from the comments in the Kyiv Independent, from all of the Lee Spring Army soldiers that are making sure to rep the set with the Bobcats and spin the block to win the Glock, we can see that 570 Russian soldiers have been wiped out over the past 24 hours. quite a decent number, and this is getting on up above the war's average. We can see that 4 armored personnel carriers were destroyed. This is a little below average, most likely by about 3 to 4 armored personnel carriers per day. We saw that 12 armored personnel, well, sorry, not 12 armored personnel, but 12 supply trucks were also destroyed over the past 24 hours. This is a little bit above average, just by about 2 to 3 supply trucks, but still great to know that the Ukrainians are inflicting a decent amount of damage to active supply trucks that the Russians are using to keep their frontline forces running. So, of course, always happy to see that. 3 tanks were also destroyed. This is a little bit below the war's average, but still, it is quite nice to see that around $9 million worth of main battle tanks has been destroyed over the past 24 hours, and of course will most likely not be used in the future. Because of course they're missing some parts and batteries are not included with these tanks, nor crews anymore, because usually those get quite crispy when the tanks get destroyed. Anyways, moving on from that, we saw that an artillery battery and an extra artillery piece were destroyed over the past 24 hours. We saw that 7 drones were shot down over the past 24 hours. 1 aircraft, that was the Su-25 or Marinka. We also have additional video footage of that one today from another angle, was shot down over the past 24 hours. And 1 anti-aircraft system was also destroyed. All in all, the numbers are not that bad today. They are, I would say, largely average for the early parts of the war that we were seeing at the exact same time last year, and so I would say they're not bad at all. I would say that these are quite good, and hopefully we'll see them climb once again into the astronomical numbers that we got very used to in the months of February and March, because those numbers were unbelievable, truly, in every single scale, in every single category. But now it's starting to enter the war's average again. With that, we're now going to be moving on from the casualty reports, and we're now going to be moving out into the front line itself. And there is a lot of news to cover on the front line. Of course, we have to go all the way from the north in Svatove, down the front line in the northeast, in between the northeast and the Bakhmut front. We then have to cover the Bakhmut front in a pretty decent amount of detail. We also have to go into the Donetsk region, which there has been a decent amount of activity in Donetsk today. And we also have a Russian military blogger that shot his eye out, literally. And then we have to go into the southern front and cover all the news in the southern front, and also this additional piece of news that we saw in Kherson, showing the intensity of the battles that went on back then. But before we get into all of the news that we have for the front lines, we have to cover the polls. Now, we run polls that I honestly have to say cannot be topped anywhere on YouTube. And this has to be entirely attributed to the effort and quality that Matthew puts into it. Matthew is the one who puts together our polls each and every night, and these things are great. They not only cover Ukraine, sometimes they cover happenings around the world that we really can't cover on the stream, because the stream is about the frontline news of the war itself. So, with that, we're about to be moving on into it, but Matthew, what do you have to say about those exquisite polls and the person who creates those polls? Because I think they deserve a medal from the Lee Spring Army.
Yes, we do love the polls. We believe the polls are a tremendous asset, and we'll always stand by the polls no matter what. So that is the official position of the LSA.
And I gotta say, long live the LSA. Can we get that in the live chat real quick? Just blow up the live chat with long live the LSAs. And you haven't done a yeehaw. Actually, Matthew, we've really toned back the yeehaws now that I think about it. We need to ramp those things up again. Like, the yeehaws need to become common again. But with that, Matthew, please throw up the first poll.
All right. So, of course, we have 3 polls to address during our first question segment. And the very first poll says European farmers are protesting against Ukrainian grain exports, and their prices have been undercut by them. And what are your thoughts? 46% said that's understandable. Farmers got to live. 12% said unsure. 21% said I'm mixed on it. And 21% said it's for Ukraine, so it's acceptable. Now, I do have to say, I am fully in favor of Ukraine. I believe this is a just war they're fighting against Russia. Russia wrongfully invaded their land, and they should be pushed out. But I have to say that Europe right now, along with the U.S., is bankrolling the war in Ukraine. So when something starts, negatively affecting those in Europe who are helping to support Ukraine's efforts, I would say that decision probably needs to be reversed, so that way they don't start hurting financially, and then that turns them and sours them on supporting Ukraine. So I would say it's understandable that they're protesting, because the farmers also have to live themselves. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to largely agree with that as well. The big reason why the West is so easily able to outdo the Russians in terms of providing support to Ukraine in the tens of billions per country is because we are incredibly well off, and we usually have very successful, well, in fact, it is the norm that Western aligned countries have very successful economies. There's very few where you can say otherwise. It is very important to make sure that we keep it that way, so that way we can continue to have the kind of wealth to be able to spend in terms of helping out Ukraine. And another thing is that many people do not know that farmers around the world in many developed countries like here in the West, they have a very hard time making money at all. Like in the United States, for example, farmers make up less than 1% of America's population, and yet at the same time, many of them hardly are just middling. They're almost in poverty, and even with government subsidies, even trying to keep those farms running, it is very expensive, and there's very little profits to be made. And so we don't really want to have the farmers getting screwed over, because that usually can have some very severe economic consequences. For example, a historical consequence is that in the First World War, we actually didn't really support our farmers well, but there was a massive increase in the need for food, especially for the American Expeditionary Force that found itself in Western Europe. And so a lot of farms started to blow up in size, and the price of crops also started to increase as well. So there was a lot of money to be made. But once the war ended and that massive amount of demand disappeared, these farmers found themselves absolutely screwed over. They could not pay back the loans that they took out to expand their farms and grow the amount of equipment they had. And so they ended up defaulting and going into to pretty much collapse. The farming industry in the United States almost collapsed right after the First World War, and that in a small part actually brought about a little bit of the Great Depression itself. It was a contributing factor, although it wasn't the largest one, it was part of it. And so I would have to say I don't know, and of course I saw someone actually say that farmers in the EU get massive subsidies. I don't really know about their subsidies, but we never really want to end up getting anyone hurt, because of course if a farmer gets hurt and they start losing a lot of money, they may not necessarily be pro-Ukrainian anymore. And so with that, I hope we address that poll the best we can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And our second poll says Zelensky says Europe will only be truly protected when Ukraine is eventually allowed into NATO. And what are your thoughts? 66%, which is the most popular option, said yes, and it is necessary for Europe's security. 6% said unsure. 16% said somewhat, but not really. And 12% said no, Europe is protected right now. And on this one, I have to say, I do want to see Ukraine in NATO eventually, but I wouldn't say that the security of Europe hinges on Ukraine. They have been wrongfully invaded, yes, and Ukraine is in Europe. But the rest of NATO is still being protected nonetheless, because the U.S. and Article 5 still applies if they were attacked. But one day I would like to see Ukraine in NATO, but I don't think it's going to happen while we're at war or while they're at war with Russia. But Enforcer, what say you? Well, I stuttered my way through that.
But to answer that question, I would actually have to say that Ukraine is important, strategically important to NATO, and I think it is very important for them to get into the NATO alliance. It's not really because without Ukraine in the NATO alliance, they're going to be pretty much jeopardized in terms of security. NATO has done incredibly well when it was when it existed during the Cold War, and pretty much NATO's extent stopped at West Germany, around right here. I mean, they were fairly well defended then, and we've definitely expanded the NATO alliance over the past few years, but I feel like Ukraine is certainly important now, because the Russians are planning on growing out their own sphere of influence again, and once again threatening the West with this sphere. Of course, the Russians don't have a lot of economic backing to work with to try and do anything like that, but if we allow them to chip away at little bits and pieces, like, for example, Ukraine, it is possible that they could become a large enough economic power, if completely unopposed, that they could start to directly threaten Western countries like Poland, Germany, and largely the entirety of Europe, which is the largest and most important part of the Western sphere outside of Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. So I would have to say that I would find it very important to get Ukraine into NATO in the future, and not only that, it provides us a massive strategic advantage over the Russians, as we'll be within only 200 miles distance of Volgograd, which is the pretty much the lifeline of the Russian economy, the Volga River. And if we are able to take Volgograd and also have a second route of advance to Moscow, it makes the Russians' position, at least if it ever went into a conventional war, incredibly weak, as they will never really be able to counter the West's advances on multiple fronts, instead of just the one we would have seen about last year that would have advanced from Narva and also from Latvia towards Moscow.
So do you think Ukraine could ever enter NATO while it's at war, or is that not possible?
That would not be possible. I don't think we'd ever want to risk that, because if we do that, Ukraine does fall, I believe, within the geographic parameters that would invoke Article 4. So as soon as they join NATO, the next day a missile attack happens, and then they invoke Article 4. And we have to sit there and seriously consider it, and then probably go into war. So I don't think we'll be doing it while they're in war. But once the war is over, I would probably put money on it that they would practically be unopposed as a NATO member, especially by the ones who are the most difficult right now, which is Turkey, because Turkey sees a massive benefit in having Ukraine in NATO, because that means that they can build their own microsphere within NATO and also the Middle East and Central Asia, because that's what they've been trying to do over about the past decade, and Ukraine would be a massive part of that, because all of their trade would have to pass through the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles, which means that the Turks would greatly benefit off of the Ukrainians being a part of the Western sphere, because in their own right, the Turks would be able to grow their own microsphere within that sphere as well. So I would say that, considering that Turkey's the one that's been giving problems to NATO members joining right now, they would be completely unopposed if Ukraine was able to apply to NATO after the war. I think it would certainly go through. So with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well. And also, I am very sorry to everyone right now, because I feel like right now I'm incredibly hyper. Do I sound incredibly hyper, Matthew?
No, you sound normal to me.
Oh, because
I think you're imagining like all the stuttering and stuff, like
no.
I think you're imagining it.
No, you see, because what happened before the stream is that we were supposed to be on a show, and then the show like pushed our whole segment back to an hour, so it conflicted with this one. So we couldn't do that show, and I ended up drinking my coffee instead of 30 minutes before the stream, literally 5 minutes before the stream. So I feel like right now I am literally like on cocaine or something. Like I feel like I'm about to be jumping off walls here in a minute. So if that is being reflected in the way I'm speaking at all, very sorry about that, because this coffee was incredibly strong tonight, especially with how soon I drank it before the stream. But with that, we are now on to the next.
even if you are too hyper, this is still like a 10 level above conversation than what we were listening to in that other program. So I think we're good. But
well, you know what was even crazier is that there were actually some really big people in there, and I was sitting there, I was like, I was like, this is where y'all go? I mean, I don't know. But anyway, so that we
won't get into that too much.
Yeah, we are not going to get into that, but we are on to the next one.
All right, and our third poll says China has encircled Taiwan and begun live fire drills near Taiwan, and will it end peacefully? 52% said yes, it will. 24% said unsure. 20% said no, China will attack Taiwan, and 4% said no, Taiwan will attack China. And on this one, I would lean toward it ending peacefully. China has said it's a really stern warning to Taiwan. But then again, like I said last night, that's also what Russia said about Ukraine. They were simply going through exercises then to make sure they were ready in case Ukraine did something to their country. And we know how that ended. So I'm going to say unsure and undecided. I think it could go either way, but I'm leaning toward it'll end peacefully. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that an invasion of Taiwan is just not possible right now. Yes, China does have, on paper, the largest navy in the world, but it doesn't really matter, because, and I'll explain why real quick. When you have a navy of around 500 surface vessels, but 113 of those are motor torpedo boats that don't even have air defense built onto them, those 113 torpedo boats are dead as soon as a conventional war begins, because a carrier group could wipe out almost all of them, and there would really be nothing to stop that. So I don't really feel like this war will happen. And on top of that, not even including the United States military support in this war, which would most likely be there, and not in physical terms, it would most likely be the kind of support we see Ukraine getting. But there's just no way, because the Taiwanese military and their entire doctrine is based around stopping a Chinese naval invasion. And they've built it exactly where it will combat the Chinese Navy, even in the present day. They have enough anti-ship missiles in such a large amount, and they're placed in just the right spots that they'd be able to counter a Chinese naval invasion. They can't conduct a naval invasion on all sides of the island either, because to be able to supply a small landing force consistently, the entire naval invasion route would pretty much have to be from Guangzhou in mainland China straight to an area like Taichung City, right across the strait. They couldn't sit there and go from the north, south, east, and west, because their landing forces would be too thinly spread. There would be too many supply lines. It just would physically not be possible. And another thing is that they also have to deal with islands like Kinmen County, which are owned by the Republic of China, and there are currently observation posts on this island. And so if any Chinese People Liberation Army Navy ships leave the port of Xiamen, the Republic of China already knows, because they physically see them sail by this island in the middle of the harbor. And that goes for really anywhere on the Chinese coast in this area. There are small little islands that are owned by the Republic of China, like, for example, Linxiang County right here, which is also owned by the Republic of China, where they can observe People's Liberation Army Navy movements on the Chinese coastline. So if they ever amass a large landing force and move towards Taiwan, either the Chinese would invade that island first, which will give the mainland island enough heads-up notice to know that invasion is coming and prepare their forces, or they would sail by, and then those islands would notify Taiwan anyways, which still gives them a heads-up notice to be able to prepare a defense. On top of that, also, there's other things to consider. The Chinese probably wouldn't start a naval invasion immediately. It would probably be preceded by an air war campaign. Remember, the United States didn't start a ground campaign in the Gulf War in 1991 immediately. They actually preceded that with a massive air war campaign. And in the modern war, air power is incredibly important, in destroying an enemy's surface-to-air missile defense systems and then picking apart their ground forces is very important. And so you'll most likely see some kind of air war campaign begin before a naval invasion does. And that would probably take, who knows, especially considering it's an island, months. And so I don't think it's going to happen, because we're not really seeing anything parring up that way. I still think this is mostly a diplomatic leverage play on the end of the Chinese. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And you know what was crazy, Matthew, is that the thing we just got off of, there was a speaker on this thing, and they officially were a member of the Chinese Communist Party's propaganda division, and they were talking on the show, and we were like, and nobody was even mentioning that, like, oh, the guy's a little biased because he works for the Chinese Communist Party's propaganda division. Nobody even said that. I was like, that's just so weird, you know? Like, I would think someone would bring that up, but anyways,
yeah, there's nothing wrong with hearing all sides of the argument, but they should at least, question it, poke holes in it to let everybody know it's probably not the case.
Yeah,
but something I want to address real quick. I put up another poll because we also heard somebody else make a statement that we thought was completely wrong. And the poll says, has China been eyeing Taiwan before Russia invaded Ukraine? 98% said yes, China has wanted Taiwan for years. 1% said unsure, and 1% said no, it started after the Ukraine war. Now, someone tried to suggest, and we heard, I think it was 2 people try to suggest this, that China has only wanted Taiwan since the Ukraine war started. That's what sparked their interest in it. And to me, that is completely false, and I think the enforcer would agree.
Yes, actually, we tried to get into the conversation, and then we never were. We never got into the conversation because we never got into a speaking role. But yeah, I mean, like, some of the things that we heard, I mean, like, we even heard something that was crazy, and I know a lot of y'all know me as the history guy, and I have a bachelor's in history, and I've taken multiple classes on modern Chinese history, and we actually heard someone say that Taiwan was a breakaway region of China, which is historically just a straight up falsehood. There's nothing in history that would say that Taiwan is a breakaway province. In fact, if you look at history, the People's Republic of China, mainland China, is the breakaway provinces compared to the Republic of China. So I don't really know, I don't even know what was going on there. And that's the most unanimous poll I've ever seen, Matthew. 98%, with only 1% going to the other 2 options. I mean, that is unanimous.
Yeah, it's good to know that everybody knew the truth, because I was dumbfounded when I heard it.
We were completely baffled. We were like, what? And nobody was contradicting that and saying, hey, sorry, man, like, but historically, the Republic of China, also known as Taiwan, is the legitimate country that ruled China. before the People's Republic of China beat them in the Civil War on the mainland, and then the Civil War never ended. But anyways, with that, I hope we've addressed those polls fairly well. And also, Tilton said he has more degrees than a thermometer, and I only have one. I only have the bachelor's degree in history. That's what I work off of. And really, I knew all of the history before I even got the bachelor's degree, but the bachelor's degree, I guess, kind of solidifies the, everyone's need for, like, credentials. So, I have a bachelor's degree in history. So, there we go. Anyways, with that, do we have another poll, Matthew?
So that was our last poll for now. So, of course, we are moving on to our Super Chat questions. And up first, we have a very generous $95 Super Chat from Mark, who is, once again,
Holy
the general
moly.
LSA now. That self-promotion was granted a couple days back. And thank you very much, Mark, for the support. He says, Russia has many hundreds of T-72 in storage. Why sending T-62 and T-55? Neither of those have autoloaders, so I wonder if this is a factor.
And I thank you for the support, Mark. And I have to make sure on this one, T-62 crew, because it's always been a question to me. It is a 4-man crew. Oh my god. For some reason, I'm so sorry, everyone, about this. I had to check this because I'm always getting this wrong with the T-62. I swore that the whole reason the T-62 had a very low profile and a very small turret is that they removed the 4th crew member. But no, that's not the case. The crew is cramped. Like, they're pretty much hugging each other in that turret. Because this thing is only 1.3 meters tall, I believe, if I remember. No, it's not 1.3 meters tall. Let me think. It's something like... Let me check. Let me just go to the stats and let me check, because this thing is incredibly small, at least in its height. It's 2.4 meters, so 7 feet and 10 inches tall. So it's just about a foot taller than me if I was standing beside it. So it's not that much bigger than a Ram Power Wagon in terms of actual size. And it's crazy to think they're fitting 3 guys in a turret that small. I mean, that is crazy. And the reason why they're sending T-62s and T-55s instead of T-72s is because while they have those T-72s on paper, a lot of those T-72s are long gone. They will never operate again, because the truth of the matter is that the Soviet Union produced things that made more things. And it didn't really matter whether they had a use for the things that were making things or the things that came out of that process. It just mattered that they were producing them. And it also kept up the Soviet economy. So they would produce these tanks by the thousands in every single category. And a lot of them wouldn't even serve in the Russian or the Soviet military. They would just be transported straight to a storage yard and kept there. And usually the maintenance was very low because nothing really worked right in the Soviet Union. So a lot of these T-72s were produced, and now they're sitting in supply yards for decades, and everything has rotted on them. The engines don't work. Most of the systems of the turret doesn't work. The autoloader probably doesn't work. A lot of the stuff's probably rusted over and require a lot of restoration work to get operational. So instead of doing that, it would be much more efficient for the Russians to just go and grab the somewhat operational T-62s and T-55s instead, because while they're worse off, it's cheaper for them to do that, because these do work and they require a little less in terms of cost to get them running again. And so with that, I hope that does answer that question fairly well. And thank you so much once again for the support, Mark. You've been around for a very long time and helping this channel to keep on running. And I hope we answered that question fairly well. And of course, if we did, make sure to have us circle back around to it, because we'll try and add a little bit to it. And so with that, we are on to the next one. But thank you so much once again.
All right, and up next, we have a $50 Super Chat, very generous, from Tangen Bragiri, who I believe changed his name back to Tangen Bragiri from just Tangen, because I remember that was always going on for a little while. I was like, why did they change their name? But thank you so much for the support, and Tangen says, buy Easter eggs for yourselves.
And thank you so much for the support, Tangen. And we will be getting Easter eggs. I remember that I used to love Easter because it was I still like Easter. Easter is a great holiday. But I really used to love Easter as a kid because that was like the only time of the year that I would have boiled egg sandwiches. And I know that the smell's not that great on a boiled egg sandwich, but the taste was really good. I love boiled egg sandwiches. And I always loved Easter for that, was for the boiled egg sandwiches. Getting off of that aside, though, I will make sure that we get some Easter eggs. And maybe we'll have a little Easter egg on the Sunday night fundraiser tomorrow. But can't make any promises on that. But I still thank you so much once again for the support, Tangen. And we will make sure to get ourselves some Easter eggs for Easter, which is literally just tomorrow. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support, Tangan. Thank you for being an old guard in the Lee Spring Army as well, and also changing your name like 4 times. We've always called you Tangan Braigiri, though. No matter what the name's changed to, we've always called you Tangan Braigiri. We'll always remember you as Tangan Braigiri, and I thank you so much for being a special part of this Lee Spring Army, and of course, enjoying it enough that you would find it worth supporting. And so with that, we are on to the final question of this segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the frontline news itself.
All right, and this one goes to Al Capone, who puts in a $45 donation. And thank you very much, Al, for the support, even though it still feels weird saying that because of his reputation. But thank you very much. And Al says, Happy Easter all, and Slav Ukraine.
And happy Easter, Al, and thank you so much once again for the support. I hope y'all all have a fun Easter tomorrow, whether y'all join us for the Sunday fundraiser or not. I hope y'all have a fun one. I hope y'all go out there and enjoy it with your family. It's a great holiday, and of course, one of the few that I think you can kind of get off during the year, kind of like Christmas and Thanksgiving. But of course, make sure to go out there and enjoy Thanksgiving. Oh, well, not Thanksgiving. I just got stuck on Thanksgiving. Make sure to go out and enjoy Easter tomorrow, everyone. And also join us for the Sunday fundraiser, where hopefully we'll be able to help out Ukrainians on Easter as well. But of course, thank you so much once again for the support, Al Capone. We know that you're keeping Chicago running like a fine sewing machine. And maybe one day you'll become mayor. Although that kind of public profile for a guy like you may not be that great. But anyways, thank you so much for this.
You want to stay as low as possible.
Oh man, that was the problem with Al Capone, is that he couldn't stay out of the spotlight, and that was the reason why from there on forward, mobsters would always keep their profiles incredibly low and hardly mentioned in the public, because Al Capone set the example that if you do, the IRS is coming for you, which rhymes actually, and it's a true statement nonetheless. But with that.
And that was the goofy part. Like, they didn't get him for like organizing murders or anything
blowing
like
up
that. They got him
speakeasies.
for like, yeah, they didn't get him for any of the serious stuff. They got him for tax evasion. Whatever you do, blow up a building, just make sure you pay the government.
Oh man, dude, and it was crazy, man, because the IRS. The IRS apparently is terrifying enough to the average American that it's scarier than the CIA. Because whenever anyone speaks of the IRS, it's spoken of in hushed tones and in raw fear. It's like the KGB nearly. Now we're about to be audited. But anyways,
Oh dear.
with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, and I hope we addressed that fairly well, Al Capone. And of course, thank you for helping enjoying this channel enough that you would support us to keep it running, and also having such a cool profile name that allows us to go on to a little story about Al Capone each and every time. And so with that. And Delta Echo Golf said, Al Capone didn't use protection, and you're exactly right. And that's why we are sponsored tonight by... And I'm just kidding. I'm just playing. But anyways, we're now moving on from that question segment and on into the frontline news itself, starting in the Northeast. And in the Northeast today, over the past 24 hours, and let me move up there to make sure that we can cover it. And let me make sure to also refresh this map as well, so that way it's on the proper day. There we go. And so, over the past 24 hours, we have seen... Nothing happened whatsoever. Y'all may not believe that. Y'all may believe it. It doesn't really matter. The front lines speak for themselves. But we can see on this front line today, near the area of Kuzmivka, a Ukrainian mortar firing at the Russians. This is actually a French 120mm mortar and an American M11101 mortar.
По пидорасам.
When you see them hanging the round on the mortar, dropping it, and firing it. And that thing was sent. You can actually see it on frame. Man, that thing's like Amazon Prime. But with that, that's the end of the clip. And it's great to see that these guys are, of course, using those big French mortars. And with that, we're now moving on to the southern end of Svatove, where we also saw the Terra unit hitting some Russian trenches in that direction today. Of course, none of this activity has led to any frontline changes, but it is ensuring that Russian forces are taking losses, which is, of course, important. And we can, of course, hear the trap remix music that once again reminds us all that if you spin the block, you will win the Glock. We can now see the video playing, and we can see the Ukrainians saying, you are being shot at. We can now see a artillery shell land on top of the Russians in the tree line, and that Russian is most likely gone. So the Frenchmen did a good job on the dugouts at... There were results there. We just started working on... And... Ooh!
Oh dear.
Got it. The guy flew away. Well, he didn't get airlifted out, but he certainly was flying. F, he flew. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, I can't read that off. Another shot. Let's see. Poof. And it looks like another one was had. It's still a little off, but it is pretty close. Very close, actually. It's already in the trench. Okay, but you have to stick it in the dugout. Yes. Well, look, you can repeat it here. This is the edge of the effing dugout. Repeat, you hit the trench, but you have to hit the dugout itself. We now see a smaller round hitting. Not a break. F, right in the dugout. Not a break. Well, it almost hit, but F. Very close. Very close. Very close. Not a break. A shot. F, F, F. There's a effing candle in the church, I guess. I don't know what that means, but we see another shell land on the dugout. Ace. Ace, F. It's already in the trench. There's so much cussing. Really? Yes. Repeat the target. You just need to be 3 meters away. Just 3 meters. That's about 9 feet. You now see another Russian down here, and he said, well, that's it. Ace. And I guess you could say that that shrapnel got that Russian into ace. In short, those SPs that are in general, your friend is already there. We work on the second one, and then we'll come back. They have less accurate shells. They want to go further. Ah, they want to go further. We finished. Disassembled the dugouts. Disassembled the fortification. A tank drove out, effed it up, crushed it in the first place. Not a break. And now we see another shell that's about to be coming in. F, well, not bad. We don't give a break. F, the same place. There was already a break. They work with a candle. Everything is fine. It's just a firecracker. They pulled out a white flag from the dugout and wave it. Not seeing that white flag, though. From the first one. And that's the end of the clip. But giving you a little bit of a look at what the terror group's been doing south of Svatove on the Svatove-Crimean line, and hopefully they will be able to continue to inflict casualties on the Russians like these. It appears that this isn't any attempt to conduct an offensive, but nonetheless it is inflicting losses on these Russian forces, which will continue to weaken them and incur some decent costs on the Russian armed forces as they have to replace these soldiers as the war continues. We're now going to be moving on from that little clip of news in the northeast and behind the lines in the direction of Seversk, where we saw a HIMARS firing off its rockets. And so, here's the clip. And look at them. They're all set up in a little group. Some call this a battery. Others call it assault. But let's watch the video. We now see them firing off their missiles. And there's a fourth one that we didn't see on screen.
Man, I call that roll tide. Give it to him, boy.
Praise hail, praise Dale. Yeah! With that, that's the end of the clip, but I gotta say, that is certainly a nice one, and I love to see that the HIMARS are continuing to lay down the fire. And oh buddy, are they not only laying them down, they're laying them up. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on down past the Seversk area and on into the Bakhmut battlefield. In the Bakhmut battlefield today, we did see a couple of interesting things occurring. First off, to go to the frontline map itself and look over the past 24 hours, we can of course see that once again the Russians are making their way to the railroad lines. They have not been able to cross them as of this moment. The only place they have been able to cross is this area around the small reservoir. And the reason being is that there were no houses or defensive positions the Ukrainians could take up on this part of the rail line, and therefore the Russians were able to take it. However, we can see defensive lines forming up on this railroad track, and we can see that Russian forces further in the southern direction are also trying to make their way towards the railroad lines. The Ukrainians are most likely going to be putting up a fairly good resistance on the rail lines. It's probably the last best defensive position they have in the city at this point, and so they'll be giving the Russians a run for their money, and Russian forces will most likely be taking heavy losses. I would expect that the Russians would be delayed in this part of the front, most likely for a week, maybe 2 weeks, and maybe even several weeks in most parts, as they try and assemble a breakthrough force to make their way across the railroad tracks and take a couple of city blocks where further Russian reinforcements can flood in from the eastern side of the railroad tracks and then try and break through even more Ukrainian positions. This means that the Ukrainians will have time to prepare, gather reconnaissance, and make sure that they know where this breakthrough will be coming from. There are several places that seem to be spots where I would think that a Russian breakthrough would occur. The highest likely option is this one here in the north, as there is a large amount of high-rises and also low-density residential buildings that would be very easy for the Russians to push into, take on Ukrainians in isolated firefights, and then try and overrun the position. Not so much here in the central area, because if we go to the Bakhmut map on Google Earth and we look at that central area right around here, we can see that it is not as I guess you could say, dense in terms of buildings as the rest of the city. It's largely open areas, which are usually more difficult for infantry to advance through, although the infantry in that area could probably be supported by armor fairly well, but that's if the armor isn't destroyed in an attempt of crossing the railroad yard itself here in the center of the city. So this is most likely going to be unlikely, and an offensive will most likely be coming from the northern end of the city or the southern end, where once again the density of residential buildings is high enough that infantry could sufficiently fight in those areas. So hopefully the Ukrainians will structure their defenses accordingly, and I may be wrong. They may actually be trying to punch straight through that middle area. So we'll just hope that the Ukrainians know what's going on there. Of course, I trust the Ukrainian commanders. They've done a very good job so far, and hopefully they'll be able to set up their defenses accordingly and be ready for the Russian breakthroughs that will be attempted within the next couple of days or even the next couple of weeks. So now that we've covered the frontline news and the frontline developments that's been going on in the city of Bakhmut, it's time to move all the way north to the very northern end of the northern flank near Krasnopolivka, where we saw that a UR-77 meteorite was used on some Russian positions. We can see a Ukrainian soldier pulled out his camera and is now filming the meteorite firing off its massive explosive charge.
Я хуею, блядь!
We now see the wire coming down on top of the Russians, more like the explosive charge, and we're about to see it go up.
Я хуею, блядь!
And this guy is loving it.
Вот так вам, пидорасы, нахуй!
Dude, he watched a small mini nuke get landed onto Russian forces, and he cheered like someone just made a goal on, like a touchdown in the Super Bowl. Let's listen to that again.
Садку залетело! Я хуею, блядь! Вот так вам, пидорасы, нахуй!
Man, he is into it.
He flicked them off too.
Сука!
Dude, he's flicking off the Russians right now that are currently singing Fly With Me by Frank Sinatra after that explosion. And they just see their final moments, someone flicking them off over there in the distance. But very nice to see that they're using the meteorites to soften up Russian positions. We have seen this strategy used a little bit during the war, and it's not that bad of a strategy. It's actually somewhat sound. With that, we're now going to be moving on from the northern flank and on into the center of the city, and specifically to the northwestern ridgeline right behind the city. Here in the direction of Yehidne, we have seen Ukrainian defenses become very extensive, a large amount of trench works being made in this area as it's vital to hold. And we can see today a little bit of activity in this area, in the trenches, as they say. Now, this text font here has me suspecting that this is most likely the flashback that uploaded this video. But I'm not exactly sure.
Using like that Star Trek like font.
Yeah. You see them setting up a machine gun bunker here. Or a machine gun in a bunker, more so. And you now see him firing it. And this man was transported from 1915, because look at that sweeping action right there. That's what someone would have done with like a Maxim or a Vickers gun in the First World War, is this right here. Just sweeping the gun left to right. Jeez. You now see him firing off another PKP outside of the bunker. We now see this guy firing an RPG, and this guy also getting some dust in his eye. Man, I wish I could put some dirt in your eye.
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
We now see this fella here. He's getting his RPG ready to fire into the distance at the Russians, making sure that the backblast is clear. You hear some rifle fire coming from the trench, going in the direction of the Russian forces. And we now see this guy firing the RPG. Also, real quick, I'm gonna stop this video because it tells us that we're having connectivity issues, but OBS is not. OBS is going strong. And so YouTube's the one having the problem. Maybe they need to, I don't know, get good. Now see the Ukrainian soldier hanging out near an ammo can and also near the PKP we saw firing earlier. We now see another soldier hanging out here on the western ridgeline, enjoying his machine gun. Also, thank you, Alpha, for the correction. It is a PKM. I've been saying that wrong the whole time. It's not a PKP. It is a PKM. We now see him firing the PKM, not the PKP. Now putting the machine gun back down after firing, and now hanging out. We now see this guy once again lining up another RPG to fire. He's about to fire it in a second. Right there. You see them firing the machine gun in the bunker again.
Не прикривай. Прикривай!
Hey, it's a machine gun! Starts laying down the fire.
This guy's kind of out of control with it.
Yeah, but hopefully it's accurate. Hopefully it's accurate.
Ах ты пидорас!
We now see him picking up the machine gun again and laying down some more fire.
He must have said, "I told you to be quiet."
He said, excuse me, some of us are trying to work here.
Охуел максимум.
Now we can see that he's about to have to go for the reload. And it is the flashback. It is the flashback. This was a video by the flashback. All right, there we go. Because I knew that text font, the Star Trek-y looking text font, it had to have been the flashback. By the way, a great channel. Make sure to go over there and subscribe to the flashback. He does great stuff on the front lines. But that's a look at the trenches in the western area of Bakhmut on that western ridge. We're now going to be moving on into the eastern area of the city, in the Russian-controlled area, where we saw a Russian camera crew running through the city of Bakhmut. Now, I wanted to show this because it is interesting, suffice it to say. It seems as though it may be real footage, especially with the audio. So here's the clip. We can see the Russians running around, and it appears that they are in an enemy at the gates kind of situation, as nobody has a rifle. Everyone's just kind of running. You now see them running still through the city. Your artillery rounds flying all around. Now you see that they're leaving the cameraman behind. They don't care about the cameraman in typical Russian fashion. But of course, the cameraman never dies. Now see them running through another destroyed building. And now running out into the wide open again. Round whizzes over. We don't ever see the explosion, and it's also very foggy.
Jeez.
You know, it's kind of weird to me, though, that we're hearing all of this noise, and it sounds like it's happening all right on top of them. And we've heard and seen enough videos that if the rifle fire was that close to them, they would be the target being shot at. So, it's kind of weird.
Is the audio potentially fake?
I'm thinking the audio might be fake, because everything is way too loud. And I like how once they get to the final building, it's like, the movie ends, and the sound just starts to fade out in the background. It was loud as hell wherever they were in the city until they get to this door, and they start fading out the footage, and then you can just hear all the firefights just starting to dissipate in the background. Listen to that. Yeah, that's fake audio for sure. So there you have it. I tried, I try to be unbiased with this war coverage. Well, actually, we are unbiased in this war coverage. We try and give the honest assessment of what's going on. And every once in a while, I'll find something the Russians made, and I'll try and put it up here to at least show a little bit of what they say is going on. But that audio right there is a clear giveaway that the audio shows that it's fake. That didn't happen around them because the rifle fire was that close. they wouldn't be running in the open like that, and we would see something happening on film. Anyways, we're moving
And also, did you notice that they apparently were unarmed as well?
Oh, yeah, I noted that at the beginning of the video. I said they have no weapons
Okay, I must have missed
whatsoever.
it.
Call them out, call them out.
Call them out.
And then they never called anything out. But with that, we're now moving on into the next bit of location location Bakhmut news is a better thing to say, where we saw that the 3rd Brigade is here. While the 3rd Brigade is largely fighting on the northern flank of Bakhmut out near Krasnohora, they are also within the city itself, as we saw 2 soldiers from the 3rd Brigade right here posing for a picture, most likely in the western area of the city of Bakhmut. So very nice to see. Of course, their faces are blurred out, but they have some pretty nice kit, Matthew. It looks like they have that Trash Panda suppressor right there. A really exquisite piece of kit.
It actually does look like the same shape, kind of like I don't know how to describe it, but it looks similar.
It kind of looks like it's for a 30 caliber rifle. Maybe. And we can also see this guy over here has an underslung grenade launcher. It looks like both of them are using, let's say actually maybe an AK-12. I don't know. It just really looks like a souped up AK. I can't really tell what these things are. They may be AK-12s. They may be AK. They're definitely not AK-103s or 105s. I'm guessing an AK-74 and an AK-12. Let me know in the live chat what y'all think about these guns. Are they AK-74s or AK-12s, or are they something else entirely? They're pretty nice looking guns, though. I will give them that. But once again, having gotten an AK, I'm not really a big fan of them. I'm a much bigger fan of the AR platforms like the M16, the AR-15s, the M4s. I think they're better, in my opinion. And I think that anyone who shoots the two will tell you the AR-style rifles are of a higher quality, just every single time. Even Palmetto State. But with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little bit of news in Bakhmut and on down towards the center, where we saw an entire Russian squad get wiped out today by the Fighting 93rd. Whoa.
Oh man, he's fast.
Easy there, Eminem. Easy. so with that, we're going to mute the audio. We can see the Russian squad right there, of course, marked with Russian flags, moving around near this destroyed house. And we now see the house is getting a little extra destroyed. We can see that some of them are just hanging out and, they're just doing their thing. And I think they're no longer doing their thing. You can see a couple of guys taking a nap down there. They're zooming in, a pretty good deal. Of course, making sure that they are sleeping well. And with that, that's the end of the video. But of course, you can see that an entire squad of Russian soldiers was wiped out today in Bakhmut. We're now going to be moving further south in the city and towards the southern direction, where we heard the sights and sounds of Bakhmut. The air is filled this time of year with the sound of rifle and gunfire as the Ukrainians stop these head-on suicidal assaults by Russian forces in an attempt to break through their lines. And so here's what that battle sounds like as of today. When you hear the distant sound of firefights and artillery fire.
Так вот у нас.
You hear the sounds of the firefight still. And we can see it is a foggy day out there. Also, notice how this firefight is most likely happening maybe a few hundred yards away from this guy, but notice how quiet it is. Unlike the Russian video where it sounded like the machine gun was literally firing on top of him.
Сегодня вообще сказочно. 22 марта.
Someone needs to make this an ASMR video and call it The Sounds of Detroit, because this could certainly win an Oscar.
You could go to sleep to these sounds.
Well, I don't think some people could go to sleep to these sounds, but
Well,
some people may. But with that, that's the end of the video, and once again, a fairly interesting look at the sights and sounds, or more like a listen to the sights and sounds of Bakhmut. We're now going to be moving on into our last video clip that we saw in the middle of the city, where we saw a very brave Ukrainian tank crew watching their tank get hit again. The reason why the tank crew is not in the tank is that apparently it got bogged down in some kind of a muddy area. It looks like it may be near the Bakhmut River, and so the crew abandoned it. It appears to actually be a T-72B3, indicating that this was actually a trophy vehicle that the Ukrainians were using. It was damaged, bogged down in this river. The crew abandoned it and is now hiding under a bridge somewhere, and then while they're hiding, they saw the tank get hit again. So we have to play the audio because you have to hear the boom. You see it right there. But there's a look at one of the brave Ukrainian tanks that made its stand in Bakhmut, and unfortunately will be lost. There's no way for the Ukrainians to recover it at this point, but a huge, you got to give a huge amount of respect to the bravery of these Ukrainian soldiers as they drive these tanks into certain danger to continue to defend this town, no matter what kind of danger lies ahead for them. It's unbelievable to see, and I've got to give them a huge credit for doing something like this and being a witness, and also us being a witness to their very own story. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little bit of news in the city of Bakhmut, and further on south and into the southern flank near Klishkivka, where we saw some Ukrainian forces storming the trenches. And they were storming. We can see right here, the Ukrainians sitting outside of a dugout that the Russians, of course, are hiding in.
Also, real quick, do you know we have Yevgeny Prigozhin in here in the chat?
Really?
Yeah, it's Prigozhin in the chat.
Legit Yevgeny Prigozhin.
Oh, well, no, I don't know if it's legit or not, but maybe an imposter.
Let's see. Is this the real Yevgeny Prigozhin? Is it? I would love to know. If it is, I'm going to get a huge laugh. But anyways, with that, we're going to let this keep going. We see Ukrainian taking a grenade, and he's creeping down to the trench and lobbing one in. He's now running out and away. And we now see that the grenade has exploded. He's now throwing in a second one just to make sure to get the job done right. And I think they're done for. And a third grenade, because the third time is the charm. We now see a good amount of smoke coming out of the bunker, meaning that the Ukrainians are starting to smoke the meats, and of course, what better time to pull out the sweet baby rays.
Man, I'm here in the chat like trying to stir up a civil war between Prigozhin and Putin. I said, come on. I said, come on, bro. You gonna let Putin take you out like that?
Whoa, come on, man. What are you, some kind of a fatty? Do a push-up, fatty. Well, you see right there, Nutsack's boys were cooked well today in the southern front. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from this clip. We're still interested, though. Is that really the Nutsack? I would be surprised if it is the Nutsack. And if it is, could I recommend to you Manscaped? Manscaped. But anyways, moving on from the Bakhmut. By the way, we're not sponsored by Manscaped. Just making that clear. If we were, though, you know, I'm just kidding. We don't take sponsorships. Anyways, we're moving on down into the Orlivka direction, where today we saw an FPV drone chasing down Russians as they were running down the street. I'm just not seeing this Yevgeny Prigozhin guy. I'm not seeing him in the chat.
Oh, he got quiet suddenly, which makes me a little suspicious.
Uh-oh. The real nutsack would never get quiet. He would run his mouth until someone stopped it. So I don't think this is the real...
He said, oh, Bliat, do we have any agents near Alabama?
He said...
No, they're too scared to go there.
He said, Bliat, get some TNT and put it in a statue, Bliat. You know, give someone the copyright strike or something, Bliat. Do something, Bliat. But anyways... Oh, it's copyrighted.
No.
Ha, 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 or whatever, however the song goes. Anyways, we can see the FPV drone chasing down the Russian vehicle going as fast as it can, and oh, nosedived right into a whole squad of guys. Oh no. Man, this thing ought to join the Olympic team with that kind of accuracy. So with that, that's the end of the clip. And I gotta say, what a chase. What a chase. And with that, we're now going to be moving out of the Orlivka area and behind the lines where we saw even more HIMARS firing. I believe this is actually, yeah, this is a... I swear we had a video like this just north. We did, didn't we? We did. Sorry, that one was mislocated. We're going to delete this one because it was in the north. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on a little bit ahead of that towards the area of Oleksandropol, where we saw the peons firing. And it's that time of year, Matthew, and the peons are firing. Actually, I believe that may be a Malka. And we see him posing for the camera, and that's the end of the clip. But very nice to see. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from that clip of the artillery and behind the lines near Betmanove. And that's what Nutsack says whenever he's betting on anything, and people go, "Nah, man, you're lying." Sometimes people in America go, "Huh, bet on God," but when Nutsack bets on something, he goes, "Betmanove." So we can see here in this video, well, this picture more like, a Russian T-80 slid into a pond and decided to have a small sip. But a small sip meant that it got lost in the sauce and never returned from the sip. It still sits there to this day, sipping on the fine, still waters of this small lake. Very nice. Very nice to see. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little picture and on out of that area, and further down the line and into the area of Marinka, near Oleksandrivka, where we saw another angle of that Su-25 that was shot down yesterday. And who doesn't like watching an Su-25 get shot down? This one, actually, you can see it very clearly. So as we can see here, here's the Su-25s coming up. It will actually be the second one in the formation. You can see it conducting a hard right turn. And as it's flying away, poof, you can see a man-pad hit it right there. You can actually see the explosion of it hitting, and apparently it completely destroyed the control surfaces to the rear of the aircraft, because we do not see any input of the elevator or the rudder beyond that point, and it rolls a little bit. We can see the pilot trying to keep control of the aircraft right there by rolling it, but it appears that rolling it didn't succeed in gaining control again either. And so we can see the pilot punch out right there. That's that puff of smoke, as the pilot's now ejected. And the Su-25 goes on down and explodes into the grounds outside Marinka. The mushroom cloud now rising over the fields. Another downed Su-25.
Some bad lag. I was sitting over there thinking, this lag is bad.
Oh, it was bad. It was down for a good minute. But you know, Matthew, picking up right where we left off, you know, I was wanting to add in a conspiracy theory here to this video, since we were part of that, we were fortunately a part of that very intelligent discussion that we were having to witness earlier, that we never were a part of. This may have actually been the Russian soldier, because, you know, Russians are always going to be a very important and powerful player in the world. We actually heard that, and I was like, what the hell does that mean? Like, they've never been an important or powerful player since the 90s. But anyways, this could be the entire strength of the Russian Federation's farts coming together in this pilot, as he farted so strongly it blew apart the back part of his aircraft, and that's what we saw right there. And let me add in the sound that the Ukrainians cut out of this video. And now it's going down. Oh, man. But with that's the end of the clip, and it's nice to see that they were able to take down that Su-25. We're now going to be moving behind the lines. We don't really know where this clip was, so I just put it in the Netsk, but nowhere in particular, where we saw that a blogger shot himself in the face today with an AT-4. Here we go. What if you try to shoot a Swedish grenade launcher from an AT-4, just like we do with the RGD-2 and the RPG-26? That is, like this. Well, let's see. see him aiming it, and oh, did you see that? Also, here he goes. He's going to shoot it again, and he fires it, and the AT-4 comes back and just like gives him a nice uppercut to the chin. But he did hit the tank.
Сука.
And oh my god, he said he got knocked out.
Вот почему.
And now he's sitting there on the show with a giant black eye. It's just an absolute welt because that thing came back and slammed him in the face. And now he's saying, that's why I say NATO weapons are crap. Listen, this
because
guy,
he doesn't know how to fire it and doesn't know how to handle it. It makes the weapon crappy.
this guy can't talk. I have an AK right here, and I'm looking at it, and this thing is made out of stamped metal and hopes and wishes. I mean, like, this thing is as good as a GoFundMe made by a random person on the internet for someone who is the victim of a car crash. It's not going to do anyone any good. It probably cost about $34, and it was most likely made by someone under the influence. I would say that Western weapons are the finest there's ever been. And also another interesting thing is that apparently they never showed the damage that it did to this tank, probably because it blew a hole wide through it. So they didn't want to show that an AT-4 could blow a hole through a Russian main battle tank, so they just didn't show that. But yes, I love to see that this guy, you know, and we always get crap. You know, look at this guy. He's kind of like James Vasquez in a way. He's dressed up like the Punisher. You know, he's got the haircut. He's trying to talk the talk, walk the walk, fires an AT-4, and just absolutely gets himself sucker punched to the face with the rim of the AT-4. I mean,
yeah, I want to see him actually, like, you know, throw down like Vasquez. That tells you everything.
oh man, if you can't throw it down, throw it down.
Throw it down.
You can't make it anywhere. But anyways,
Я говорю, что натовское вооружение это говнище.
no, NATO weapons aren't crap. You're just crap at using them. Anyways, we're now going to be moving on from that blogger's clip, which was absolutely hilarious. And what's even more hilarious is that we can't even get a copyright strike for that because YouTube doesn't respect copyright from Russia right now. But anyways, we're moving on from that area and into the southern front near Volodar, where we saw the Ukrainians using a Bofors gun. 40 of these have actually been given to them from Lithuania. I'm sorry, 36 of them have been given from Lithuania. You see the turret right here. We see them getting it ready to fire. And they're standing by.
Mina!
Now see them aiming it. We see something up there burning. And we can now see the Bofors gun firing. See them lining up for the next few shots. Now see him firing again. The guy on the back of the turret jumped a little. Dude, imagine going to a ski club with this thing.
Yeah, really.
Pull! And the little clay thing starts flying across the sky, and you just go boom, boom, boom. And just blow away with the clay, the whole entire skeet field and everything. But I really like the Bofors guns. They're really neat. They've been around forever as well, but they're still a pretty decent anti-aircraft gun. We're now going to be moving on from that clip in the Volodar area. Of course, the Battle of Volodar has pretty much already ended, so we're not getting any news from there anymore. And we're now going to be moving on to the area of Varvarivka, actually. I thought it was Vasilivka, where we can see a Ukrainian convoy moving to the front. And with that voice crack coming in perfectly in the middle. Oh, you gotta mute that.
Oh dear.
Well, we see the Ukrainian convoy coming by with some BTRs, some armored cars, some more armored cars, some more BMD, I don't know. Anyways, more armored cars. I forgot the name of that thing. It's a BDR something. It's a scout car. And then we can see some more armored cars bringing up the rear. But a little convoy on its way into southern Ukraine. And so with that, we're now moving on from that little clip. and on into our next one, further down the line near Kristopilya, where we saw a Russian mega trench. Now, some of y'all may have heard of the biggest bird, but I know that many of y'all have never heard of the biggest trench. This is the biggest trench we've ever seen. It's 70 kilometers long and continuous. That is actually the little Google Maps thing that someone made to show where this trench is. It goes all the way from Melitopol, almost all the way down to Berdyansk, and in satellite footage, you can see it from space. It's huge. It's massive. It's most likely an anti-tank trench. That almost sounded like some kind of intro to a comic book, but it is a huge trench. It's 70 kilometers long, and we know that the Russians probably spend a lot of time and effort to create something that the Ukrainians will probably fill in once they get there. We're now going to be moving on to Vasilivka itself, where we saw the Ukrainian Air Force operating over Kherson. And, of course, no music nicely this time, so we hear them shrieking right over the Ukrainian forces right here. And that's the end of that video, but once again, just wanted to show off the Ukrainian Air Force because they're pretty cool. We're now going to be moving out of the southern front and on into the Kherson area, where we also saw a tank graveyard in Kherson, left over from last year, and showing what kind of destruction and losses the Russian forces took.
Люди, я вас
Quite a lot.
Підпишіться, якщо вам нравиться ця хуйня згорена, блядь. Ви представте, скільки тут долбойобів згоріло, блядь, це піздець.
And that's the end of that clip, but once again, showing you the amount of destruction that Russian forces have taken just in this one small tank graveyard. There are many graveyards like this over Kherson, but this is just a look at one of them as the Ukrainians continue to collect up all of the burned out and destroyed wreckage of the Russian forces from the fields outside of the city. We're now going to be moving on from that little clip and on up into Kyiv, because believe it or not, we've covered every single piece of news there was, north to south, east to west, there was in Ukraine, and all of the news outside of Ukraine and in Russia itself. And so, without further ado, it's time for us to cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 409 of the war in Ukraine. And sadly, it is only 3 minutes and 30 seconds long, and I am starving to death. I don't know about you, Matthew, but I am starving.
I'm always starving. Speech.
Speech. And here we go.
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці. Сьогодні насичений день, перша ставка. Основна увага боям за Авдіївку і Бахмут, за Луганщину, за кожен із тих напрямків, де ворог намагається зламати оборону всієї України. І я дякую кожному солдату, сержанту, офіцеру і генералу, які протистоять цьому, які здобувають Україні стійкість всій державі, саме там, у боях, у найгарячіших точках передової. На ставці доповідали командувачі напрямків, главком, розвідка, окремо підготовка нових бригад, постачання боєприпасів і зброї у війська. Друге, апарат РНБО разом з урядом, разом з міністерствами готує новий потужний санкційний список осіб, які працюють на агресію. Вони будуть заблоковані. Третє, провів тривалу нараду щодо енергетики, питань як стратегічних, розвитку і захисту нашої енергосистеми за будь-яких умов, так і поточних питань про енергозабезпечення наших людей і українського бізнесу. Четверте, в офіційне життя нашої держави додаємо нову традицію поваги. Сотні тисяч мусульман України і мусульманська спільнота світу, різні держави, різні народи у період священного Рамадану дотримуються суворого посту. Коли сідає сонце, відбувається іфтар, вечеря. В Україні це шанується всюди і навіть на передовій, навіть в умовах боїв. Кримсько-татарський народ шанує Рамадан. Повага завжди має бути обопільною. Тож від цього року щорічно в Україні за участі глави держави буде проводитись такий спеціальний захід поваги. І сьогодні вперше в Кримсько-татарському культурному центрі світ має знати, повернуться в міжнародні відносини повага і порядок лише тоді, коли у Крим повернеться український прапор, коли там буде свобода, так само, як і всюди в Україні. Мав честь нагородити наших воїнів, українських мусульман, які б'ються разом з усіма.
Is this yesterday's address, Enforcer?
Мав честь
I don't believe so, but let me check. Well, with that is the end of tonight's news.
Well.
I thank you all so much once again for watching. Of course, if you all enjoyed everything except for yesterday's speech, make sure to hit the like button, make sure to subscribe, and also make sure to comment. because, of course, all of that helps this channel to reach out to more folks, and, of course, let them know what the Leaf Spring Army is and the kind of goofs that we pull off here on a daily basis. But, of course, thank you all so much once again for watching the news. We're about to be moving on into our question segment. We're going to be addressing all of the polls. We're going to be addressing all of the questions. And of course, well, not all of the questions. We're going to be addressing all of the super chats we have and as many live chats as possible. We try and get to every single one of them we can because, of course, to ask a question on this channel, you do not have to pay. You do not have to pay to do anything on this channel. There's no such thing as memberships. There's no such thing as what other ways do people monetize this stuff? There's no ads, there's no sponsorships. We don't run any of that. The only way we support this channel is through super chats. So if you appreciate this channel and what we do and you would like to support it, that is the way you can do it. And if you do have a question, we always make sure to recognize and thank everyone who does make this channel running possible, so it will always be addressed. Of course, however, you do not have to pay to do anything on this channel. You can stay in the live chat absolutely free. You can watch all the streams absolutely free. It is up to you whether you decide that this is enjoyable enough to support or not. And so with that, we are now going to be moving on. Wait a minute.
I think you forgot Crimea news, by the way.
You know, that's actually a good point, because that was actually the title of tonight's stream, and the news is not over because we actually forgot to cover the one. Call him out, and you see he got all the analytics. Like, he doesn't know how analytics work on YouTube. Like, you know, that was just a goofy statement. But anyways, in the town, the port town of Feodosia, which we'll go down to here on Google Maps, and I'll show y'all real quick. In the small port Feodosia lies some shipping corridors, some port facilities, as you can see right here. And you can see some small boats, some small naval boats, sitting here, resting the Russian Navy. One thing that's fairly interesting about this town is that today the sound of missile fire came in and exploded somewhere near those port facilities. And we saw a couple of pictures of that today. We saw the missile streaks, most likely of air defense missiles trying to intercept the incoming ones, and we also saw the plumes of smoke most likely coming from the port in the distance or another military facility nearby. We didn't really get a lot of information that was exact about what happened around the port of Feodosia, but we did see that there apparently was some kind of missile attack where the explosions occurred. And of course, this is big news because it's very rare to see the Ukrainians striking into Crimea. It is incredibly rare to see them striking this deep into Crimea, because this may as well be the closest thing we've ever seen to them officially hitting near the Kerch Bridge. So with that, I hope that addresses all of the news fairly well. And, you know, call us out, because I almost didn't get to that news. Somehow I made that the thumbnail and title of tonight's stream, and I didn't get to that piece of news, which was the whole main point of tonight. So sorry about that, everyone. Sorry about that. I do apologize greatly. And if y'all want to flog us, cancel us, or burn us alive, you may do all three. So with that, we are now moving on into the polls now that we have covered all the news. And with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and we have several polls to address, and the very first one says, the DOJ has opened an investigation into the Pentagon documents leak, and what are your thoughts? 40% said it's going to be a tough one to solve, 17% said unsure, 16% said I'm in the middle on this one, and 26% said it's going to be easy to find out. Now, let me look at my notes, because I made thorough notes to go on another show this evening to discuss these docs.
And then never discussed them.
Yeah, ended up never discussing them. So I think it's going to be somewhat tough to solve, because they were presentation slide decks, it looked like, is what had been printed out and put on social media, which were classified secret and also top secret, which is one of the highest levels of classification. I think it could be, you know, I can't remember for certain if it was shared with the Five Eyes. I think it was. So it could come from any of those countries, because we share that intelligence with them. Some of the documents marked top secret would not have been shared with any other country except internally here in the USA. So I'm kind of unsure on this one to an extent, but I'm leaning toward it's going to be tough to solve. But Enforcer, what say you?
It is probably going to be tough to solve. And even at that, it seemed as though that the information wasn't really greatly in depth. It was more of a surface level kind of infographic, which suggests that this was supposed to be passed around a little bit more than normal classified documents would be. So going off of that, I would say it's probably going to be pretty hard to solve where this thing leaked from, considering that probably a lot of people got their hands on it. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And also, Matthew, I saw Magic Sky Girls say, call it practice time, Matt. You wouldn't believe what we did. We sat here for hours today, combing over those classified documents, looking at them, studying them, learning about them, reading everything we could about them, to go on to someone's show that we were invited to come on. We made it very clear that we have our own show to run at a specific time, so we'd have to be on there and be off by a certain time. We got on there, and we sat on there, and we never got brought on, and we were just sitting there. That was... Like, you know, and usually, you know...
It's just really water under the bridge at this point anyway.
It's yeah, you know what? It's water under the bridge. Yeah. I'm sure some point around, someone will come knocking at our door, you know, trying to bash us about this or something, but we're going to let it be water under the bridge at this point. But anyways, with that, we are now on into the polls themselves. Well, actually, we are in the polls. So with that, I hope we addressed that one fairly well, and we're on to the next one.
All right, and the second poll says, which will have the bigger impact regarding the classified documents leak? 33% said U.S. intel gathering abilities, 27% said unsure, 26% said both will have major impacts, and 13% said Ukrainian military secrets have been exposed. And on this one, I'm definitely going to say the bigger impact is going to be with the U.S. intel gathering abilities. We're going to have to figure out where that leak came from, how it occurred, and how they're going to prevent it again. Which is not a small task. That's a very large task. The fact that we have all these safeguards in place already regarding classified documents and it leaked out anyway is a really bad sign. And, you know, our intelligence services are good, but they're not, you know, excellent. So hopefully they can get that figured out. Also, I've seen some folks saying in the live chat that the documents looked fake. And I will say that there seem to be two different versions of the documents. There are the original ones, which show the Russians taking big losses and Ukraine taking about twice as less. And then there's some other documents that show the Russians slaughtering the Ukrainians, which I believe were put out by Russian propagandists. But I would say overall that the documents need to be figured out, and we got to get this situation under control because it could lead to some very, very bad consequences if other documents, more sensitive ones, get exposed, you know, exposing where Ukrainians are right now and not a month old. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that it is quite concerning that classified documents are still being put out there. It's happening everywhere, though. It's not just a thing that happens in America. It happens literally anywhere. Like, hell, I think War Thunder is the best system in the world at getting classified documents from everyone. I think every single major country in the world has had some kind of massive classified documents and information leak that somehow happened because of War Thunder. For the United States, it was information on the F-15EX, which is one of the newest variants of the F-15. For China, it was classified information about the ZTZ-99s, which are their premier and finest main battle tank. For the British, it was the Challenger 2. For the Russians, it was the MiG-29, the T-90A, and also the T-90M, which isn't even in the game. So, you know, it's something that's happening everywhere, but for the United States to have it, you see, I set higher standards for the United States. I encourage people to divulge classified information in documents if it's not America or a Western country. If it's the United States, however, we don't really need that kind of business here, you see. So we need to find this person. We need to thwack them and put them into the slammer a little bit, and also figure out how to stop the leaks the best we can going forward. Maybe we need to have the explosive collars put around people's necks whenever they get possession of classified information, so that way as soon as they take a picture of it on their phone, you just push the clicker and their head, you know, takes a trip. But anyways, I'm just kidding about that. Obviously that is bizarre and freaky. That wouldn't actually ever be applied in real life. But with that, I hope that answers that poll fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, one other thing, for the folks that think the docs are still fake, one thing that would support your argument is the U.S. military has come out and said publicly that Russia has lost 200,000 men thus far, and it looked like, as of March 30th, that alleged classified document showed that the Russians have only lost about 44,000, and the Ukrainians have only lost about 17,000. So that's one thing going in its favor to say the documents are fake. But on the other hand, the Pentagon is freaking out like they're real. So kind of confusing. But Enforcer, were you trying to say something?
No. And so with that,
Oh,
we are
okay.
on to the next one.
All right, and our next poll says Russians reportedly broke into the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant and kidnapped employees. And what are your thoughts? 65% said not good. They must be plotting. 10% said unsure. 18% said why would they do that? And 8% said it's fine and it doesn't change anything. And I thought the Russians were already in charge of the power plant. They were already occupying it and using the Ukrainian employees as basically slave labor. So my question is, why would they do that? That doesn't make much sense to me. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to agree. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. And also, it's pretty bizarre to hear that they are capturing people and kidnapping them. I don't know if they understand that they're nuclear power plant workers, so it's not exactly like a washing machine or a toilet or anything that they can just kind of grab and take away. I mean, what Russian has a nuclear reactor at their home? Oh, bled for them. I need my nuclear reactor to run time to kidnap a nuclear scientist. But still, moving on from the joke and into the serious matter, that doesn't really sound like a good thing to do, especially considering the fragility of a nuclear power plant. Those workers are probably very crucial in helping that power plant to keep on running. So with that, I hope we addressed that poll fairly well. We are on to the next one.
All right, and the next poll says, allegedly, with a big emphasis on allegedly, Taiwan is on high alert status for unusual activities observed by their Air Force. And what are your thoughts? 48% said it's expected due to Chinese drills. 36% said not good and Taiwan is in danger. 8% said unsure, and 7% said, what does that even mean? Now, obviously, unusual activities, that can mean pretty much anything. I would call the island being encircled probably unusual. That doesn't happen very often. So I'm not really sure what that even means, but there you go. So Enforcer, what say you?
Well, actually, I would say, Matthew, that my father and my great-grandfather worked for the Chinese Communist Party, and this happens quite normally. There's no reason for anyone in the world to be concerned, according to that one guy. It's like, what do you mean? It's like, there is reason to be concerned, but on top of that, there's no way an invasion could happen with that kind of naval layout. No way in hell. When
somebody's bio says, communism will rule the world one day, and proud member of the propaganda division, you're probably in deep trouble.
When they literally put out a tweet 3 hours before that show saying, I am a proud member of the Chinese Communist Party, and my parents before me were also proud members as well. Here's a picture of my dad by Lin Bao. It's like, you can't sit there and say that you're just I don't even know what the hell that was, really, like, when I thought about it. It's like, this is literally people who clearly have agendas pushing this as fact, on every single side. It wasn't like neutral analysis. It was like people with agendas coming up and battling the agendas. It's like, what in the world? Honestly, I haven't seen anything like that ever. That was the first time we saw it. And then we saw one person pop up in this thing that both of our eyes went huge. And Matthew, you know who I'm talking about. We were like, what? We were like, where in the world are we right now? Like, we seriously started thinking maybe we should leave like right now.
Very controversial guy, but we won't say his name.
Yeah, we won't say his name because it is that controversial. But we were like, oh crap, it's like this is a place we might need to leave quickly. But anyways, moving on from that, I would say it is quite unusual, and that's probably why the alert status is there, is that there's currently a massive naval exercise by the People's Liberation Army Navy happening around the entirety of the island. So with that, I hope that does address that poll fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and that was our last poll for now. So we're moving on to our Super Chat questions once again. And up first, we have a $50 Super Chat from Darren Maynard. And thank you very much, Darren, for that very generous support. He says, I love your work and keep it up. Long live the LSA and Slava Ukraine.
And thank you so much for the support, Darren, all the way from New Zealand. And I thank you for enjoying our work and encouraging us to keep it up. We try our best to keep this thing up, of course. Keeping it up is a big deal to us. We enjoy keeping it up. Of course, it's rough sometimes. Of course, we get tired. But it is still a great service to Ukraine and to make sure that people stay involved in the war. And I think those are very important things. And I thank you so much, Darren, for enjoying it enough and finding it worthwhile to support this channel. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And long live the Lee Spring Army and Slava Ukraini. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And up next, we have a $30 Super Chat from Charlie Nickel. And thank you very much, Charlie, for that support. And he says, Based on your moronic critics' silly age comments on you guys, I suppose we shouldn't take the early works of Beethoven too seriously. Genius, like a good sense of humor, is ageless. Keep up the great work, kids. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you.
Oh man, he got it in a row. But still, I thank you for the support, Charlie. And I would have to agree with you. It's kind of silly. I think it's really silly to discredit anyone for anything they can't control. Because I feel like, and and I don't know, maybe I'm in a small group like this, but I feel like discriminating against folks based on their age is almost the same as discriminating against people based on anything else. Because you're sitting there and taking something that someone can't control. Let's say, who's to say that a 20-year-old isn't more competent than a 35-year-old? Well, at least on an individual person-by-person basis. One 21-year-old isn't more competent than the 35-year-old or something like that. It's like, why in the world sit there and make a mark against them? And just discriminate against them because they are 21. That makes no sense to me. And I don't know what it is with people out there like that. I don't really know what it is sometimes that drives people to dislike that. I mean, I guess the best thing I could think is I'm always trying to try and figure out if there's a logic behind any of this, or is it just that they try and come up with anything. But it's like maybe Matthew and me have done more being 22 and 21 than they have at around 40 years old. So then that makes them angry because we're out there just, doing things and they never really did. I don't know. I don't really know what it is with the haters, but
Man,
the
these
haters
kids these days.
The kids these days, I'm telling you. Oh man, I'm telling you, the kids these days, they kick the ball out into the street. I said, hey, I could kick it back, and they said, oh no, you ain't kicking no balls but your own. Oh man, I'm telling you, I get no respect around here. I'm telling you, it's terrible. But yes, I would have to agree with you completely, Charlie. It must be jealousy. That's all we can sign it off to. And that's why we're not going to give them any more credit. Because they're going to keep going as long as we're here. Those haters are going to just keep on hating. And we're going to keep on doing what we do. It doesn't matter what they say. We still raised $900,000 in support of Ukraine. They haven't. And we're still doing our thing. We're still supporting the war. And right now, we are the 90th largest live stream on YouTube. And we are the only one in the top 100 that covers the Ukraine war. So we're doing something right because we're keeping people, one, involved in the Ukraine war, and two, we're actually helping to save lives. Those are really the two most important things regarding this war. It doesn't really matter if you have a lot of viewers or you're covering the news well. So with that, thank you so much once again for. Of course, we want to cover the news well. Let me make that clear. I don't sit there and just throw that to the wayside or anything, but at the same time, I put a lot more emphasis and priority on saving Ukrainian lives instead of appeasing keyboard, warriors or something like some channels do, where you want to feel like you're in the Pentagon or something. This is not the Pentagon.
Sure.
If you want to go to the Pentagon, you can go to the Pentagon, or you can go get a job in the Department of Defense. I'm not doing that. So
Who knew? It turns out that sounding dull doesn't help raise money for victims of war. Who would have known?
No, and oh man, I was just thinking about.
But anyway,
we'll say. Well, you know what? We're moving on. But still, thank you for the support, Charlie. I hope that does address that fairly well. And of course, as always, to the haters, call them out. And with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $20 super chat from BC Skyman. And he says, Happy Easter to the Enforcers and the LSA family, and Slav Ukraine.
Hey! And happy Easter to you, BC Skyman, and thank you so much for wishing the entirety of the Lee Spring Army a happy Easter. Easter is a very special holiday, especially for Christians like ourselves, and we really do hope that everyone has a fun one tomorrow. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you once again, BC Skyman, for always enjoying this channel and always helping us to keep this thing rolling. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
In the next one, big shout out to Marion Deemer, who I believe was just leaving as I'm reading this one off. And good night to you, Marion.
Good night, Marion.
Thank you very much for the support. They put in a $20 donation and no comments, sadly. So we'll put a comment there for you, and good night. Love you, Ukraine.
And thank you so much for the support, Marion. Didn't leave a comment, like Matthew said, but of course the support helps this channel to keep on rolling, helps us to stay alive, and I've got to thank you so much once again, Marion, for always enjoying this channel and helping us to keep this thing rolling. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
All right, and also good night to you, Trister1. I was about to type good night, but I just said it anyway, so good night to you. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from CK Bold, who says, of course, take a live chat question. And CK Bold, you are very consistent with that, and we do appreciate the support once again. And the live chat question, sponsored by CK Bold, goes to Madison Music Teacher, who says, do you think U.S. satellites are giving Ukraine info on Russian positions daily?
Yes, I do. I think we are giving them updates on Russian positions every single day with our satellites. That seemed to have been one of the first things we did in the war. That was one of the first bits of support we ever provided was the satellite footage and information. So I think that we're still doing that to this day. And it appears that a lot of people are getting that information as well, and either they're paying for it or they're either getting it from the Department of Defense as well and then publishing it to the public. But with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well, and I thank you so much once again for support and sponsoring that question. And with that, we're going to be moving on to the next one. Before we do, Matthew, Gregory Pinnock asked, you know where the haters end up? And by the way, I hope you had a happy birthday, because I just realized that your birthday, I believe, ended around 7 minutes ago. So I hope you had a good one, because we told you happy birthday last night. But Matthew, we know where the haters end up, don't we?
I think we do. I think we know quite well. We know too well, actually.
We know it too well, and we actually behind the scenes call it the penal colony, because whenever anyone does anything wrong
yeah,
here,
now we call it outside the scenes of penal colony.
yeah, that's just whenever anyone does anything wrong here, we're like, oh, well, it's time for them to go, and I'm sure they'll be going to the penal colony soon. But with that, I hope that answers that fairly well, Gregory, and we're on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a generous $50 super chat from none other than Hal Rose, longtime channel legend, who says, Enforcer Matt, damn the detractors, full speed ahead, Slav Ukraine, and pick a chat question, please.
And I thank you so much for the support, Hal. Of course, damn the detractors. We're not into detracting. We're into tractoring. And also, we are going to be going full speed ahead once this semester ends. Once the finals are over, we're going to be going all in to try and get everything done that we can, every kind of video that we could do, anything like that. We are once again lining up, probably trying to do a gun review video at some point. We're actually not going to be uploading this on Enforcer Matt's channel. We're actually going to be starting a segment on this channel of gun reviews, just for people who are interested. And I hope that you'll enjoy them. And also, Slovakia. And we will make sure to pick a question from the live chat. But thank you once again, Hal Rose, for enjoying this channel enough that you find it worthwhile to support it. And so with that, let's grab a question from the live chat.
All right, and the question from the live chat goes to Sax2, who says, after Ukraine wins the war, how fast do you reckon they will be accepted into NATO? Do I need a stopwatch?
I don't think you need a stopwatch. By the way, I once again want to thank, in 1 second, let me go get their name real quick, because I want to make sure I call it out properly. So 1 second.
Steve2848 is who you're thinking about.
No, actually it was someone. It's Robert. It's Robert Perrin. Robert, who sent the Soviet stopwatch.
Oh, you're talking about that?
Yeah,
I thought you were talking about what Steve sent. We hadn't got to that yet, but we'll get to it in a minute.
Steve! We're getting to what Steve sent in a minute. It was really, really cool. And actually something that we have been wanting since the start of the war, and we finally got one. But Robert sent us a Soviet stopwatch. Actually made in the Soviet Union. It says it right at the bottom. It says made in the USSR, and it also has that little symbol in the middle of it that says CCP, which also, in Cyrillic stands for the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics or something similar. Anyways, I wouldn't use this because it most likely will probably take a year or two. I would put a guess on that. That would be the best time frame possible for it to be taking the longest, and also for it to be taking the shortest amount of time. So that would be my guess, in my honest opinion. And so with that, I hope that does answer that question fairly well. Thank you so much once again for the support, Hal Rose, and sponsoring that live chat question. And also, some of y'all asked, does the Soviet stopwatch run backwards? Believe it or not, it actually runs not that bad, but I can tell you one thing. The back of it is interesting. It looks like someone took like a polishing machine to this thing or something and created these patterns on it. They're not really that advanced of a pattern. It looks like a fairly simple thing to do, fairly quick actually, and they're not even really consistent either. So you can tell that this thing is certainly Soviet. And also, Enigma said it's SSSR, not CCCP. I swear it's CCCP. Let me put that in. Let's see. So let's get the Central Committee of the Communist Party. That's what it stands for, and it's on everything. It's on everything. So it is the CCCR. Oh, well, CCCP in English, but it's really CCCR in Cyrillic. But anyways, that's a side note. And I wonder if we can find. Let me type this in, Matthew. A Soviet stopwatch. And let's see if we can find the one we have. It's literally this one. It
is literally that one.
Yeah,
it is
one
almost.
They're all the same. They're all the same. But that's it right there. That's actually the exact same one, exact same company and everything. With the little, actually, it doesn't say that in Russian down there. It says made in USSR down there, CCCP. It doesn't say that in Russian. It says it in English on ours. But it literally looks the exact same. Everything about it's identical. But with that, that's really cool that there's a million of these. Apparently, these were just mass produced and they're known everywhere. But anyways, I hope that addresses that fairly well. Thank you once again for support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, big shout out to Steve2848 that we just mentioned a moment ago. He sent us something to the PO box. I think it showed up yesterday and we picked it up today. And he sent us a really, really cool item. He sent us the stamp, the Snake Island stamp of the Ukrainian soldier telling the Russian warship to, F off. And Forster, I sent a picture of it to you because I'm sure the audience wants to see it. So check your Discord DM.
Check my Discord DMs. I'm afraid. But here's the picture. There's the stamp right there, and it's actually on a big envelope. It's actually attached to the envelope that also has the same stamp print on it, but it's in monocolor. So really cool. This was really cool, and we want to thank Steve for sending this really cool gift. We have always wanted one of these since the beginning of the war. We never knew where to find one, and we never got one until today, and we now finally have a Moskva stamp. Before the end of the war, we're pretty much going to have everything. I bet you we'll finally get that prized Wagner patch in the mail eventually. But that's another thing for another time. Anyways.
True. And I got to say that, Steve, big thanks to you for that, because I have always wanted one of those stamps, but I didn't know where to get it. And this one came directly from Odessa. That's what it said on the postage, on the envelope that it came in. So very cool. And thank you for sending it, Steve. And I got to say, probably my favorite stamp of all time. The second to this one would probably be that Queen Elizabeth one that we got a short while back.
The Platinum Jubilee.
Yes, Platinum Jubilee.
But that was actually the perfect enunciation. Platinum Jubilee. But anyways, it was really cool because it did come from the city of Odessa. And I was like, that is really neat. That was super cool. And we got to thank you once again, Steve, because that was an incredibly amazing gift. And we've gotten so many cool ones. Of course, not to go over all of them again, but like the Soviet stopwatch, and also the iMac radio transmitter from Robert. And we also got, let's see, I'm trying to think, turn off your gaslight, sent the stamps. I mean, we've gotten so many. We've gotten the ammo cans from Jay Bagwell. I mean, we've gotten so much cool stuff. And I got to thank each and every one of y'all for sending what y'all sent. And there's a lot of stuff I haven't even called out. But call them out. Call it out. I got to thank y'all so much once again for sending all these neat little things, because they truly are treasured by us, because they're so unique, they're so special. And not only that, we usually save the letters that y'all send in the mail as well, because it's so cool to know what kind of stories our viewers have. Like UK Nexus, that sent us a cap from the first company. Well, actually, the 1st Battalion, Queen's Company, 1st Battalion of the Grenadier Guards is the proper title for it. He was actually in that during a part of his life and sent us a little story in the letter about what he had done in the British Army. And I thought that was so cool. And one thing I would have to say is, if y'all ever send anything to our P.O. box, you can find our P.O. box in the About section of our channel. We always love to read y'all's letters. Never think that we just want the items. Honestly, sometimes the letters is really what makes the items so neat and so special and so treasured. And so if you ever send us fan mail, make sure to include a letter about who you are, not like where you live or anything, but who you are and part of your life story, because we always love to read that stuff. And we find it, we're so...
Well, a return address is helpful. We do enjoy a good return address.
We do want return addresses at least, but you don't have to go into like great personal detail like your social security number in a letter. We just love to know y'all's life stories. But still, with that, I thank you so much once again, Steve, for sending us that incredibly cool little stamp. And with that, we are now on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have another super chat from BC Skyman, who puts in a $10
Oh my
a
god.
$10 donation. And BC Skyman, we're not laughing at you. BC says testing 1, 2, 3, and it did come through loud and clear, BC. And I'm very unfortunate that it was having an issue earlier, and hopefully it didn't mess anything up. But thank you very much, BC, for the support. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I thank you so much for the support, BC Scanman. By the way, we're not laughing at what you said. We're laughing at something in the live chat because that was a very straightforward question. Quite honest, but very straightforward, and caught both Matthew and me off guard. But and moving on from that, I got to thank you so much once again for support, BC Scanman. Of course, it is working, and we thank you so much once again for supporting this channel and helping us to keep it running. Oh my lord, that was one hell of a question right there, Matthew. I mean, like, you might want to put that one down in the spreadsheet or something. With that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Psyops. And thank you very much, Psyops, for the support. He says, there once was an orc from Bakhmut. This idiot thought he could shoot. As he stood from his trench, there was a sudden flinch. Now they haul his cadaver away with a winch.
With a winch? Man, what are they doing?
That's some of that Edgar Allan Poe type dark stuff.
I was sitting on the floor. There was a knock at my door, and I quoth the raven, nevermore. The raven said, "Whoa, it is only me. I have a copy of Gilbert and Sullivan's, The Mikado, and I also have absinthe." But anyways, I thank you so much once again for the support. And yes, that I would have to agree with Matthew there, Psyops, that is definitely Edgar Allan Poe-ish. And I put a heavy emphasis on ish because Edgar Allan Poe died in the middle of a street wearing someone else's clothes, and he kept on saying someone's name when he was dying, so it was a really weird way to die. Honestly, wouldn't really recommend dying like that. I've tried that before. It wasn't really fun. Looking more so to die by not falling out of a window, at least. I know that. I'm just kidding about that. But anyways, thank you so much once again for support. I hope we addressed that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Tom Exman, who puts in a $10 donation and says, do you have a nice family get-together and dinner for Easter, Matt and Andrew?
We haven't yet, because Easter hasn't happened over here. Easter is tomorrow for us. But
I say, do we have one planned?
Oh, well, yeah, we do. Yeah, we'll probably be eating boiled egg sandwiches tomorrow, most likely. And that is like our Easter. That's like our whole Easter is a boiled egg sandwich, and that is an Easter for me. Like, boiled egg sandwiches are great. I love them, and you know, you can never have enough boiled egg sandwiches. I saw a lot of people that actually agreed with me in here that they thought a boiled egg sandwich was really good, and I have to agree. The smell's not that great, but the sandwich itself is tremendously good. And so I guess you could say that's kind of our plans. Also, my plan is to try and knock out a lot of college work that has to be done as well, sadly, on that very same day. You know, it landed on a Sunday, weirdly enough. So, you know, that'll have to be taken care of too. But with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Plexus Gaming, who says, I can finally help you guys out, and if there isn't a car fund for Matt, let this be the start. Take a message from the chat.
And I thank you so much for the support to the car fund for Enforcer Matt. He does need to get a new car. The car he's got is a lemon. We're being completely
facts.
We're going to be completely honest here. We're not holding back any punches from that car. That car sucks. So thank you for starting the car fund for Enforcer Matt. Hopefully one day we will be able to get him a new car, and also we will also be grabbing one from the chat as well. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. And what is the live chat?
All right, and this live chat goes to Hoodoo, Texas, who says, I wonder if Bakhmut is going to be a Stalingrad with the Russians taking the place of the Nazi 6th Army.
Good question. I would have to say probably, but that would count on a counteroffensive. And right now we're kind of expecting that a counteroffensive won't be happening in that direction, so maybe not. It may end up being something like Verdun, though, which is kind of in a similar category. So with that, I hope that does address that live chat fairly well. Thank you so much once again for sponsoring that live chat, and I hope we answered it fairly well. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from, I believe it's pronounced Panny Lay. I'm not really sure. Can you run this poll? Is the cup half full, half empty, or in the middle?
That is an interesting poll. We will run that poll, and we will see. I'll save my opinion until after the poll's over. So we're gonna let Matthew make that poll, and I'm gonna sit here and think about how hungry I am.
Is the bowl of noodles full, half full, or empty?
It's about to be empty.
Let's see.
That thing about to be empty, man.
Let's see. So,
An activist said, "Is a boiled egg salad the same thing as an egg salad sandwich?" I don't really know. That's a good question. And I think that requires a think group, a think tank, to come together and come up with a decision on that one. Let's see. The cup is full of Guinness. Goodness. So someone's going to be having a fun Easter. Let's see. No right answer. There is no right answer. It's really just a matter of opinion, or a matter of wordage, really.
there's a psychological theory behind the picking of the answer, but I think it's a bunch of pseudoscience.
I think it kind of is pseudoscience, because I've heard some people say one thing and then they're the complete opposite of what it's supposed to mean. But anyways, with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Psyops. He puts in a $10 donation. And Psyops, I looked it over, and I am scared to read it off. I hate to say it. So I'm sending it to review anyway. He says, if it's too bad, please take a live chat question.
And we will, hopefully, yeah, we're gonna have to grab a live chat on that one.
I think so.
But I do thank you for the support, Sibes. So what do we have for a live chat?
All right, so the live chat question sponsored by none other than Psyops goes to Plexus Gaming, who says, Enforcer, did your degree cover the European theater of World War II?
My degree covered almost everything but the European theater in the Second World War, or the First World War for that matter. That's really stuff that I studied outside of the realm of college, because my college didn't really focus on that stuff a lot. Really, it really kind of focused on weird historical subjects, I'll be honest with you. Or it focused on some specific historical subject a little too much, to the point that all the classes got repetitive. So a lot of the historical knowledge that I have really came from me just studying outside of college, stuff that I was interested in, and then I just got the bachelor's degree just to sound good, really. But one thing I will say is that I did take a decent amount of classes on modern Chinese history, so that is one thing that the college helped me out with a little bit, but even then, it didn't really add much. Just being completely honest, considering that I'm graduating in a few weeks, I don't feel like it's that bad to say I didn't really learn much of anything extra in college. It really was stuff I had already known, and then just went over again, and then spent thousands of dollars to do. So, you know, don't mean to put anyone down if you are planning on going to college. The degree is important, but, you know, it's not what you'll think it is. It's actually quite simple, at least from, you know, what we did. Anyways, I hope we addressed that fairly well, and I thank you so much once again, Sasha, for sponsoring a live chat. Although it was unintentionally sponsored, thank you for sponsoring it nonetheless. And so with that, we're now going to be covering this poll. And what do we have on the poll, Matthew?
All right, so the poll is the cup? And the options are 58% said half full, 34% said in the middle, and 9% said half empty. So the majority of you did not want to be the pessimistic individual according to psychological theory, and you chose half full. The in the middle people, I would say that what's going on? I don't know, but unfortunately, what say you?
Okay, here's my philosophy on this, and this is going to sound really, I think really straightforward and kind of logical. If I give my glass to someone to refill, and I say, can I have a cup of water? And they fill it halfway, and they give it back to me, I'm going to say, can you fill it up a little bit more because it's only half full? If I'm drinking from it, and then I put the glass down, and it's in the middle, I'm going to sit there and say the glass is half empty. Because I'm drinking it, and so it's in the process of being empty, so it's half empty. If it's being filled, and it's only been filled halfway, it is half full. You see, it depends on the action of where the liquid is going, whether it's going into the cup or out of the cup. That really determines whether it's half full or half empty to me. So, you know, I don't know if that makes sense. Does that make sense, Matthew?
I mean, somewhat. I mean, I just say fill it up all the way. Why are we gonna put it halfway?
You know, that's honestly what I would be saying if I was getting a drink from somewhere. I'd be like, why don't you only fill up my cup half full? Or, excuse me, waiter, can you fill up my cup? It is half empty. That's how I would say it. You know, that's me. And Ancient 86 said that's profound. I don't feel like it is profound. I feel like I feel like that's sarcastic, honestly, because to me that's like the way I look at it.
Yeah, if you said that to Dwayne, they're probably like, you want this knuckles half open or half closed?
You want this hand open or when it hits you, or do you want it closed? What do you want? But that's the way I would do it. And then Lauren said a tad overthought. Well, no one ever said that I was not an overthinker. I do overthink everything. Matthew can tell you that. I overthink every single thing. So that's why I make up statements like that, because it's all overthought to hell and back. And that's why I make a great president, because you know whatever decision I'm going to make, it's been overthought at least 100 times, and then the decision I'm making is the only one that will turn out with the best outcome, I guess you could say. So with that, I hope it's off to work we go. And now the Disney attorneys are after us. But anyways, I hope that answered the question fairly well. And with that, we are on. Well, I hope that answered the poll fairly well. And we're on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat is from none other than Rob Eisman, who puts in a $50 donation. And thank you very much, Rob, for the support. And thank you for also being a very long-time channel viewer. And Rob says, my friend's son convinced his mom she is mad. Let me know. He was buried today with a plaque of the SSBN 654 dedicated to him from the 654 Blue Crew, LSA, LSAAF, LSMC, LSCG, and LSN. Rest in peace, brother. Run silent, run deep, and thanks, LSA, for all the support.
And I thank you so much for the support, Rob, and I hate to hear that he was laid to rest today. And also, let's see, buried today with a plaque dedicated to him from pretty much every single branch of the Lee Spring Army. And I've got to say, that is a huge honor to know that someone took such credit, such stock and such faith in the Lee Spring Army that they would actually have a plaque dedicated to them when they're buried. And so I got to thank you so much, Rob, for counting on the LSA for support. And I know that many people, including myself, were more than happy to support you during this very difficult time. Of course, it's always difficult when things like that happen, and I'm glad to know that me, Matthew, and everyone else in the Lee Spring Army, loads of folks, were able to support you and everyone that you know during this trying time. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And I gotta say, that is quite an honor. I believe that is the first time ever that we've ever heard of anyone putting the LSA to that high of an honor, that it would actually be mentioned on a plaque or something similar. And so with that, we're on to the next one. But thank you so much once again for the support. And of course, the LSA, every single person in the LSA is always there for the rest of the LSA. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Psyops once again. He puts in a $10 super chat and says, here's a Putin rhyme. When I was a boy, I would lie. Now send all my soldiers to die. As I sit in my chair, I say, it not fair. When Ukraine takes Moscow, I'll fry.
You'll fry? They're going to cook him? He's going to turn into Johan de Witt?
Johan de Witt?
You know, the Dutch guy, you know, liver eaten, cannibalized, all that stuff. You're going to turn into Johan de Witt? Dude, they're going to come up to Putin, and some guy from the South, he's going to be sitting there, oh, Lord, I got the delete kit. We about to throw him in the bag, have a barbecue. But anyway.
What the hell?
Oh, man, you know that guy I'm talking about. You know the one, you know, honking the horn with his stomach. But still, I thank you for the support. I would have to say, that is quite a good rhyme. I'm not going to lie. That was also a pretty good rhyme right there. But still, thank you so much for the support. A very good rhyme as well. I liked it, and I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one. But thank you once again for helping this channel to keep on running.
All right, and the next one goes to Putin will hang in the middle of the Kremlin, who puts in an $8 donation and says, question from the chat, please, and I'll catch up with you later. And Putin will hang in the middle of the Kremlin. Thank you very much for that support and keeping the channel running. And of course, we will grab that live chat question, which goes to, let's see here. It's going to go to Buckbeak Gardens, who says, do you think that Putin and Xi plan to take advantage of the fact that NATO is running low on supplies and China starting a war with Taiwan right now will divide NATO's resources heavily?
I would have to say that it's a bit of a fallacy being propagated by the Russians that the West is running out of supplies. As far as we understand it, we're not running out of supplies, even in the ammunition department. We're actually keeping a steady supply amount over here and then sending extra over to Ukraine. So I would have to say the Chinese, if that was the case as well, the Chinese would have already attacked Taiwan during another part of the year, last year or this year, and we're not seeing it happen. At least for now. So I would have to say that that wouldn't really be the case, in my opinion. After having to sit on a show for an hour where we were supposed to be on the show for an hour and then we didn't talk at all for an hour, and then listening to everything that was said over there, and then seeing that news commentators from some of the biggest news networks in the country were watching this thing or speaking in it, I found out, two things. First off, I wouldn't really put a lot of stock in the national news, and second off, well, you know, that's nothing new, and then second off, nobody really understands the situation, at least strategically, with China. There's just no way, even with a lack of Western support, they could really invade Taiwan. It's just not possible. I've broken down the numbers before, off scenes. It's not possible. The invasion force that they would have would be so small it would be meaningless, and there would be no way to really consistently supply them. That one landing force would probably be wiped out before the second wave ever arrived to the island, and then they would repeat the same thing over. And then Richie MC is saying, "Call out the show!" No, we're not. We're not calling them out.
It was a Twitter talk space.
So Twitter Talkspace, and I believe that solidified the idea that that is the last time ever we're ever having guests on our show or ever going and being a guest on someone else's thing, because we got asked to go onto this show, and we made it clear to them beforehand, we run our own show, and it goes live at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, so we can only be there until about 9:50 p.m. Eastern Time. And they said, okay, that's fine. We get on there, we never get made a speaker, and then they sit there and say, oh, we've decided to extend this segment another hour, which means that we're just on there and we're never talking. And completely wasted our time. We spent all day, we went and changed our whole schedule today to go and review these classified documents, to talk about them, and then never got to talk about them. It was honestly, like, you know, just being completely honest here, because we usually try and keep the stuff under the rug, but it seems people on YouTube don't like when you keep it under the rug, because the first person to get the story out is the one that's viewed as right. Honestly, took that as being very rude to waste hours of our time like that in a day, to have us come onto a show and then not even have us talk. That was just really rude, in my opinion. So, you know, just putting that out there, just in case. But anyways, I would say that it just can't happen. I mean, even without a lack of Western, well, even with a lack of Western support, there's no way physically they could do that right now and be successful. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and I hope that addresses that fairly well, and thank you once again for the support.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from Still Thinking, who says, hey guys, I just wanted to come and support the channel, and can you say hello to my wife, Carrie Ann, and thank you. And hello.
And oh, hello there to Carrie Ann. And also, just wanted to support the channel. No problem at all. I thank you so much for appreciating this channel enough that you would support it. And I got to thank you once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And of course, thank you once again, Still Thinking, for being an old guard on this channel and being around for so long. And so with that, thank you once again. I hope we addressed that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And you know what? I'm starting to think that this Yevgeny Prigozhin in the chat that just showed back up after he disappeared for a minute hasn't said a word and won't respond to anything. You know, it's not crazy to think that might actually be the real deal right there. Like, he's not saying anything.
Where is he? I'm not seeing him. Like, everyone's talking about him in the live
you have to type
chat.
his name in at YEV, and then you see him pop up.
Yeah, it is his name. It is Yevgeny Prigozhin. I don't know. Maybe it is Yevgeny Prigozhin. I don't know. That means he's probably planning on sending us a Manscaped package in the mail to make us a nutsack like him. But anyways, with that, we're on to the next one. And also, I saw some people. Let's see. Oh yeah, BC Skyman said the thing, our year anniversary, was very successful. Yes, it was, and we actually got complaints that kind of revolved around how we dealt with our guests on that night, that we only allowed them 30 minutes a pop. But the thing was that we strictly kept to that so that we wouldn't be disrespecting or treating anyone rudely if we extended someone else's segment and then just ended up booting them off the show and had them sitting there for an hour. And then that's what happened to us today, and we made sure not to do that when we had guests on our own show. And then that didn't happen to us on someone else's show. And then on top of that, it was a bizarre show. I mean, like, they had people in there that clearly had stated agendas on their Twitter profile. Like, you know, a literal guy from the Chinese Communist Party. And I was like, this is weird. But anyways, with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have an $8 super chat from Deeds Miller, who says, "Greetings from NOTL, Ontario, home of Fort George, where we flung cannonball at each other in 1812.
And Fort George in Ontario. Fort George in Ontario. Come on. Here we go. I've seen this in reenactments before. This is actually a pretty neat place to go. But let's see if the map will work. This is actually just north of Niagara Falls. That's really cool, actually. Didn't know that. And also, another cool thing about it is that it's just outside of Buffalo. Buffalo. I like it. Really nice. Really nice. And it's up here. Right here. I gotta say, I like Fort George. Really cool. And it is cool to know that we did fly at each other up here. In fact, a fun fact, the British conducted a massacre in Buffalo. And also we conducted a massacre in Niagara Falls. So this was literally like Massacre Alley up here. If you were in this area, it was literally a PvP free-for-all where everyone was just killing each other for the hell of it, right in this part of the country during the War of 1812. So an interesting little bit of history. And of course, thank you so much once again for support and pointing out a really cool historical site here in North America. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support. And I hope that does answer the question fairly well.
All right, and up next, we have a $5 super chat from Craig Platel, who says, "FYI, new milestone today, Oryx hit 10,000 Russian pieces of equipment lost, visually verified today."
And I thank you for the support and sharing that with us. That is big news. As a matter of fact, I'd say that's quite large news. And it's good to know that that has been visually confirmed, because according to the casualty reports that were given on the classified documents, there's no way they could have taken those kinds of losses. Because let's say 10,000 tanks were lost, and let's just assume that all of them were lost with at least a crew of 3. That means that all of the Russian losses, according to the classified document report, in vehicles would be their total losses, because it would be somewhere around like 30,000 men, and then there would only be an additional 15,000 infantry losses that were also taken. So yeah, you know, that is good to hear, because that means that that classified documents report on the casualties and losses was not true, to say the least. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And I see a lot of people flaming Yevgeny Prigozhin in the chat. And everyone better calm it down, or he might send us a statue. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $5 super chat from Andrew Kajda. No comment, sadly, but thank you very much for the support. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I've got to thank you so much for the support as well. No comment, but of course, I also have no comment to you as well. I don't respect people who don't put in comments. I'm just playing. But of course, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. The support does mean a lot. It helps to keep the lights on. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again.
All right. And also, Roger H., what did he say? Because apparently he said something earlier. So what did he say? I'm really curious at this point. But anyways, up next,
and
we have
who is that in question?
Yevgeny Prigozhin.
Well, he commented just on... Oh, okay. Well, I'll be interested to hear what it is. But with that, we're on to the next one.
And the next one we have is from BC Skyman yet again. He puts in a $50 donation this time, and thank you very much, BC. Very generous. He says, "Check out Helen, Georgia for the LSA family. It's an old German town in northern Georgia." And I've never heard of that place.
And let's see where this is in northern Georgia. This is in the northeastern part of Georgia, near the Chattahoochee Oconee National Forest. I don't know how to pronounce that really, but let's take a look at this town. Ah, yes. It is the German version of Mountain Brook. It is literally German Mountain Brook, man. It looks like German Mountain Brook. But
These
really,
houses right here, they're like 1,000 square feet, 2,000 square feet. They're going for about $4 million.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. You know it. Let's see here. I wonder, Matthew, if this town looks like this, because a certain German escaped, you know where. Germany, and came over here, kind of like they did in Argentina. See, you ask your granddad if he knows any stories from the Second World War, and he just goes 9. It's like, oh, wait a minute. But well, I gotta. I'm not.
He knows 9 stories from the war.
Well,
What do you say? 9 stories?
If you ask your grandfather if he has any stories from the war, and he goes 9, they're not going to be good stories.
I thought you meant like literally. I was like, why such a specific number of stories? Only 9.
You took a whole year of German and you didn't know I was saying no?
The accent wasn't quite right or something.
Man, sad. But I gotta say, this is a really cool little town. I mean, a really neat one. I like it. It's pretty cool. Let's drop down in Street View though, and let's see what this town really looks like. Cowboys and Angels? There's steak there. The Troll Tavern. It's family friendly. And it really just does look like a stereotypical German town. Not bad. It's really cool though. I really like the theming. That's neat. I wish more towns in America had like a standardized theme like this, because it does make the towns really neat to go to. It makes them have their own little thing instead of like every copy paste American town that looks like a highway pit stop. With all the signs and the gas stations and stuff. Because they all look like that. None of them look like this, and this is really cool. And so I got to thank you so much, once again, for the support, BC Skyman, and letting us take a look at Helen, Georgia. Because this is a really cool place. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Snow White, who puts in a $20 donation and says, Prigozhin, if you're here, love Ukraine.
And thank you for the support, Snow White. And Prigozhin, if you are here, number 1, you look like one of the 7 dwarves, and 2, slow Ukraine. Thank you so much once again, Snow White, for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I know Disney is very happy about you supporting this channel. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support. Fun fact, Matthew, did you know that the voice actor for Snow White in the animated film Snow White never got another job after her voice acting role in Snow White because Walt Disney made sure that her voice would never be used anywhere else?
Well, that's very kind of them.
Yeah, very kind of him. He screwed that woman over for life. She pretty much ended up dying destitute without any money to her name because she couldn't really get a job anywhere thanks to Walt Disney. Really dark side of that. Yeah, really dark side of that movie. Another crazy thing about those early animated films is that the voice actor for Bambi in the movie Bambi actually went on to serve 2 tours in Vietnam in the United States Marine Corps.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, I mean, that's a crazy story. But anyways, with that, we're on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And the next one goes to Craig Platel, who puts in a $5 donation and says, the Bible stopping the bullet is more apropos rather than ironic.
Apropos, are you sure you're reading that right?
It says apropos. I've never heard that word before.
Apropos.
Let's see. It means with reference to, concerning. It is a word.
Interesting. Well, I would agree with you. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we're on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
And the next one goes to David L., who puts in a $5 donation and says, will you be streaming tomorrow evening, and will there be a fundraiser?
Yes. Thank you for the support. And to answer that question, yes, we will be streaming tomorrow. I have to tell y'all something. I am dedicated. I don't know about other people on YouTube. I can't talk for them. I'm not them. But I am dedicated that until this war ends, my 2 goals are to keep as many people interested in this war as possible and to raise as much money as possible to save Ukrainian lives. I don't care what we have to do. That is the whole goal of this channel. I don't care what we have to do to make that happen. That is what we do. And we will never miss a Sunday fundraiser. We didn't even miss Christmas. We made a pre-made video for Christmas because it fell on a Sunday to make sure that we would make it to that Sunday fundraiser. We have run so many Sunday fundraisers at this point. We've reached the cap. We've run 50 of them at this moment. So now every single time a Sunday fundraiser happens, we have to go back and we have to delete one. Of course, the accounting's still there and YouTube is managing the account, but it's no longer active where anyone can even donate to it. And then we have to make a new one every Sunday. That's how many Sunday fundraisers we've run. We've never missed a single one in the history of this channel, and we will be running one tomorrow. And I think it's a very fitting day to run one on days like Christmas and Easter, because usually days like Christmas is all about like giving gifts and things like that. Easter is all about forgiving and being kind and things like that. And I think that's a great fitting day to have a fundraiser on, because the day is entirely about kindness and forgiving and things like that. So I think it's a great day to run a fundraiser, and we will be running a stream tomorrow. You can bet your boots on that. And so with that, I hope that does address that question fairly well. I thank you so much once again for the support, and I want to make this clear. That is our goal. Like, I don't know why people come in here and they expect our goal to be to entertain folks the exact way they want to be entertained. My goal is to keep as many people interested in this war and to keep support to Ukraine going in any way, shape, or form, and to have as much of it as we can as possible. Those are the two goals of this channel, and you can bet until the very end of this war, those are the two goals we're going to keep on going at. Everything else, sideshows. That's why this stream will sacrifice everything else but this stream to keep this thing running. Hell, I've even sacrificed a couple of grades in college to keep this thing running every once in a while. You know, just like completely giving up assignments that can't be done because there's not enough time to make sure that the stream keeps going, because everything comes second to the goals that the stream has. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And I hope we answered that fairly well.
All right. And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Craig Platel, who says, per T62 question, Covert Cabal has put out 2 new videos on Russian tank numbers in the last 2 weeks, updating his original from 6 months ago.
And I thank you for the support and sharing that with us. I will try and look into them. But one thing I always try and do here, and I think this has also been lost a little bit throughout the war, because a lot of people will always come in here and say we have to have corroborating sources from other people, other YouTubers and stuff, is that I don't really take a lot of corroborating resources or information from other YouTubers, because I don't know what kind of amount of research they've done. And if anything I learned today from the thing we did on Twitter, it's that some people who are way up there, when you really hear them talk unfiltered, it's like, where in the world is this coming from? Like, I don't even know, like, some of it didn't even have a logical basis, like, just being completely honest. And I don't know if other YouTubers are like that as well. I don't know if they actually have a logical basis to what they're saying, or whether it's true or not. And we don't get everything right on here. I will make that clear. We're not like the oracle of truth or anything. But I always want to make sure that we come up to our own independent conclusions on things and get our own information from official, like, primary resources, or sources, more so. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I will check it out, though, and I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a $5 super chat from Eric N, as well as a $4 super chat from Junebug72, and also we have a $2 super chat from Dupper Bob, who says, "Love Ukraine," and we have a $3 super chat from BC Skyman, who says, "Happy Easter, guys." And I think that's back when he was having problems with the super chats. But thank you to Eric, Junebug, BC, and Dupper once again for all the support. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I thank you so much once again to all of y'all for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. It is folks like y'all who help this thing to keep on rolling, and we thank y'all so much for appreciating this channel to find it worth supporting. And so with that, I hope we answered that fairly well. And also, I saw a question from Ida No, and I'll answer this real quick because this is a good question to be cleared up. They said, have you ever received confirmation of donations from the organizations the LSA donates to? We have not, and the reason why is because YouTube manages the accounts all like this. We can run a fundraiser for Doctors Without Borders, but there are probably 100 active fundraisers at that exact same time that are opening and closing right then. So instead of taking the donations and then individually handing over the pieces, like, you know, our 30,000, someone else's 5,000, someone else's 500, and then saying exactly where these came from, YouTube just clumps up all the funds that are supposed to be sent to Doctors Without Borders from everyone, and then they send it to them. So instead of those fundraisers seeing that the Enforcer and the Lee Spring Army raised this much, they just see that YouTube sent them that much. So we never get confirmation of that. YouTube is the one who manages all of that on their end. And that's kind of a part, I guess, a downside to it is that the nonprofits never know that we're the ones that do a lot of the fundraising for them. But I would rather go without any thanks from a nonprofit rather than having the possibility of people getting scammed, you know, if we ran it another way. So that's the answer to that question. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $6 super chat from Margaret Hemsley, who says, I love listening to what year it is in the likes. And have you heard of Frozen Army in Korea? And see you again after my trip.
And thank you so much for the support, Margaret. I hope you have a fun trip, by the way. You're on your way to Adelaide. And also, I have heard of the Frozen Army in Korea. They froze to death, literally in place. And let's see, love listening to what year it is in likes. Right now, it is the year 1893. So, what happened in the year 1893? What happened in 1893? Oh, the panic of 1893. A crash on the New York Stock Exchange starts a depression. That's nice. On May 9th, Edison's 1.5-inch system of kinetoscope is first demonstrated in public at the Brooklyn Institute. On June 9th, the front part of Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. collapses, killing 22 War Department clerks and injuring 68 others. Hey, that's the theater that Lincoln died in. Well, actually got shot and he died in the house across the street, but wow, 1893, what a year! What a year! U.S. Marines intervene in Hawaii, resulting in the overthrow of Queen Liliuokalani of Hawaii. Oh my god! The construction of the first motion picture! Dude, 1893 is a hell of a year. I mean, goodness. The rank of Chief Petty Officers established in the U.S. Navy. Boy, I can imagine a YouTuber out there that needs that rank of Chief Petty Officer.
I was about to say that.
Yeah. Let's see. The World's Fair happened in 1893. The best World's Fair ever, by the way. I love this World's Fair in Chicago, the 1893 Chicago's World Fair. Look at the facades that they had for these buildings. I think this is peak architecture right here, in my honest opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty nice.
I mean, it's impressive. It was unbelievable. It was all made out of wood, too. None of this was stone. It was all wood facades. Oh, a really cool fun fact about the World's Fair. But, yeah, let's see. Let's see here. What else? America's finest beer. That's not a thing. Anyways. Let's see. Delivery. Oh, let's see here. World Parliament of Religions opens in Chicago. Really cool. Let's see, Frederick Jackson Turner gives a lecture titled Significance of the Frontier in American History. That's actually a very important one in history. That one's actually referenced a lot if you ever talk about the American West. But what a cool year. Wait a minute. Roy Disney was actually born in 1893. They would screw over Snow White just decades later. But yeah, I mean, like, a really cool year. To suffice to... No, I thought this was the actual Cadbury who made Cadbury chocolate. I was about to be, no way. I was like, that's not him. But wow, like, there was actually some pretty interesting people born in this year. A lot of senators were actually born in 1893. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one. I hope you enjoyed hearing what year it was, Margaret Hemsley. It's now 1901 at this moment. But with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support. And I hope we answered that fairly well.
All right, and with that being said, we have a $2 super chat from Philip Fixes, who says, whenever you're triggered, go down a rabbit hole.
And thank you for the support, and from here forward, we will do a rabbit hole. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and I hope that does address that fairly well.
All right, and real quick, let me copy and paste something. There we go. And up next, we have a $2 super chat from Midget Hobbit, who says, do you think that the Island Boys can box Putin? There's a vid.
I just an island boy. Oh god.
Gosh.
Oh god, man. And then they got so bad off that they had to be asked, maybe you need to sell your jewelry. How much is it worth? And then they walked off. Oh, I'm not talking about but I don't know. I've honestly, I have to be honest with you. I think Putin can actually beat up both the Island Boys at the same time. I hate to say it, but I think that actually would be the way it goes. Because has anyone seen the Island Boys? Like, it's sad. Anyways, we're on to the next one. I hope we answered that fairly well, though.
All right, and up next, we have a $1 super chat from Destantra, who says, thanks for the fun, or poor Russian, I'm not sure if that word is what, but I'm scared to read it, but Russian something.
And I thank you for enjoying the show, and we'll make sure to let the Russian somethings, have some fun. And by the way, it seems as though our boy Yevgeny Prigozhin is still in the chat, and if he is, come and get him.
Doing?
I don't know.
Send your best boys.
I don't know, but But if you come to Alabama, you ain't gonna be walking with your boys. You're gonna be rolling out the hospital in a wheelchair with your boys. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have the Morse code decoders of the stream because we're moving on to our live chat questions. And tonight, it was solved by JP's Gone Fishing, formerly known as JP's RCs, Rumpelstiltskin, Cfay, Mark Hodges, Cliff Simonson, Dark Warrior 137, Paul Schultz, and Earl Bernua, I believe. Sorry if I'm butchering that, but the Morse code says, Ivan, did you hear that boom? It must be our insurance premium going up. Slavia LSA, Slavia Ukraine, and Igor.
And that's the sound of money. And y'all got that correct. Everyone, give the Morse code decoders a round of applause. I'm quite serious because they've been doing this for 409 days now, and it's absolutely unbelievable to think we're now 10 days into the next 100 days. Before long, it will be day 500. Believe it or not, it will be day 500. And I've got to say, so y'all did get that Morse code message correct. While I sit over here after drinking a literal gallon of coffee, and I'm yawning, I don't know how, but y'all did get it absolutely correct, and that is the Morse code message. And so with that, I hope that does address that Morse code message fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a super chat, and this one is from Carl Carlson. He puts in a $9 donation and says, so many video titles where the war is basically won. Every single day we're on the verge of winning. And then what? Are these video titles just clickbaits?
Where in the world have we said the war? I don't think we've really ever said the war is won on any of our titles. And I can't speak for other YouTubers, Carl. I don't manage other YouTubers. Unlike some YouTubers who would love to tell us how to run our show, we don't tell other YouTubers how to run their show. Because one thing I understand is that I'm not putting in the work and the hours and taking what's ours on other channels. The other people are. So if they put out news like the war is won, I can't really help it. It's not true until there's any kind of a peace agreement or a peace treaty. You know, it's not true. But, you know, they put out their own videos. I put out mine. You know, if you want me to call them out, I can. You know, I could. But then, you know, then we just get known as the 21-year-olds who are trolls and stirring up trouble or whatever. And then I cry about it. And, you know, everyone kind of tells me to toughen up. But anyways, I was just playing around. But in all seriousness, I don't know what that question is really supposed to be getting at. You see, am I supposed to say that everyone in the YouTube community is clickbaiting and they're only doing this because it is a trendy topic at the time, although none of them ever covered anything close to this? Maybe. Maybe that's what you're asking. But, I mean, you know, I don't really know how to answer that question. I got to be honest with you.
Meanwhile, as you're talking, we've got an age restriction on an old stream.
Really? Wait a minute, hang on. Which one?
Russians' advanced tanks destroyed, day 361.
361?
What the hell?
Dude, that was literally like 60 days ago. That was 2 months ago. Someone went back there and went, age restraint. Who the hell is watching day 361 news? That is not even yesterday's news. That is 2 months ago news.
Prigozhin just discovered the channel. He's going back, talking about, Bliat, I've been missing this analysis the whole time.
I missed this one. No one can see this one easily. But with that, I hope that answers the question, Carl. Because we don't do that. I don't know, you know. And anyways, some people say clickbait is a thing. I don't know if people know this or not, but clickbait is kind of a little overused sometimes on YouTube because, you know, if you look at any titles, almost all of them, if you really want to get down into hair splitting, are all clickbait. Because, you know, like even videos that sit there and go, the secrets of China exposed. It's like, apparently they're not secrets because you pulled them up on the internet and you're just quoting off other things on the internet. So that's clickbait. You know, like Mr. Beast curing blindness. That was supposedly was clickbait to people because they weren't actually blind. They had cataracts, although that's like legally blind. You know, and
I mean, you got to give some room for like creative titles. I mean, there is some like line you have to draw that's clickbait, that's actually like basically a lie. But I mean, some titles that people freak out about that they call clickbait are simply people trying to make it interesting. You know, I think people get a little too militant about it.
Yeah, and then, you know, there's people who sit there and kind of loosely apply it to whoever they dislike and try and attack them with it. Like everyone in the Ukraine war world at this point, I believe, has clickbait, including ourselves. You know, I will say that the Crimean bridge down, while it wasn't meant to be a clickbait, apparently from how the thumbnail and the title looked, a lot of people thought the bridge was blowing up. So if you came in here off of that concept, it was kind of clickbait in a way, although that wasn't my intention when I made that thumbnail. But there are some people out there in the Ukraine war world that clickbait constantly. By the way, I'll let you know, they clickbait constantly. I could probably pull up their YouTube channel and scroll through their videos and find plenty of clickbait titles, and then they'll sit there and apply it to us. You know, they'll say we're clickbaiting, but then when someone else in the Ukraine war world that they know of puts out something that is just straight up misinformation or clickbait, they won't say anything. So, you know, honestly, I can't control what other people do. You know, I'm not clickbait police. You know, everyone has faults, and I usually don't try and harp on people's faults because people make mistakes. Some idiots out there think once you make a mistake, you got to beat them into the dirt and keep beating them until they're dead. That's just stupid. That's a really backwards way of thinking. But with that, I hope we answered that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one is a super chat once again. This one is from Alberto Escobar, who puts in a $20 donation and says, "What do you think about the counteroffensive or the Ukrainian offensive? Will it be between May or June?"
We're actually thinking it'll be in mid-April to late May. We're thinking that's most likely the window because the weather will be ideal. It won't be too hot, and also the ground will be dry. So those are great for the infantry, great for the armor. Great for the infantry and the armor at the same time. So I would say that would most likely be the case, is that it's going to be mid-April to late May. And we're getting very close to mid-April. So we're going to be entering our supposed window very soon. So with that, I hope that does. Let's see, what do you think? Also, I think it will go fairly well because we know that there's about 9 new brigades that have been raised just for this counteroffensive. They're going to be the breakthrough brigades. And so wherever they get sent, they're hopefully going to do incredibly well. But we don't really know exactly where. So we'll just have to wait and see when it begins and how successful it is to really gauge whether it was a great idea or not. But with that, I hope that does answer that. Thank you so much once again, Alberto, for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one. And also, someone said he's talking about that other channel. Enderslayer said that. Yes, I am, because it's always interesting how they always apply the rules very inconsistently, depending on whether it's us or someone else. Because if it's us, oh, you know, open up the floodgates, just bash them. If someone else could do the exact same thing as us and be in the exact same category of Ukraine war news, not a single peep. And also, I guess you say karma came around. But anyways, with that, we're on to the next one.
If you know, you know. But anyways, up next we have a $5 super chat from Epic Trains Canada, who says, "When they finally get Putin, there will be pierogies and kielbasa with vodka in my house and Igor in Slavic Ukraine."
Igor! And hopefully there'll be a really cool train to spot that day too, because you are the train spotting guy on this channel. And I have to say, your videos are not that bad, especially for Canadian train spotting. That's really good stuff. And I got to thank you so much once again for the support. And I would love to have some pierogies right now. I'm starving. A pierogi sounds delicious. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
All right, and the next one goes to Captain Hello, who puts in a $5 donation and says, "Will the 91 Danish Leopard 1 tanks help Ukraine, or are they too old?"
Oh, they will help Ukraine. I think they certainly will. They're comparable to the more modern versions of the T-62, in my opinion. So they'll do quite well. They'll at least be on par with the Russian counterparts in most instances, but I'd still recommend them being used in reserve units, ones that aren't put on the front line a lot. So with that, I hope that does answer that question fairly well. Thank you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and this one goes to Midget Hobbit, who puts in a $2 donation once again and says, "No, please react to the Island Boys training vid."
I just an island boy. I couldn't. I just probably copyrighted, and they're probably viciously protecting their copyrights at this point. So sadly,
they have to. That's all they have.
They have to, or else they're not going to be able to get that Happy Meal. But I hope that answers the question fairly well. Sadly, we can't. Most likely because of copyright, but I would watch it if it wasn't copyright. But with that, we are on to the next one. I hope we addressed that fairly well.
All right, and we are back into the live chat got questions. And next up, we have one from Dakota DeBear, who says, are T-55s and T-54s armor thick enough for resisting 40mm and VOG grenades launched by a launcher or launched by a drone?
It could resist a 40mm VOG, most likely. However, a 40mm Bofors gun could probably punch through some parts of the armor fairly easily. It depends really where it hits, but yes, it could. That's at least what I would be going off of for now. And so with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
Now, I saw in the live chat, Yevgeny Prigozhin finally spoke up. He said, I've been here since March 2032, boys. Now, Yevgeny Prigozhin, he traveled back from the future to come and see us today. I'm just joking, of course. But anyways, he says, fake YouTube name to be funny. I rarely catch y'all live, but didn't giving because I'm a bachelor, and that ended the whole message.
Okay, so it's a fake Prigozhin. Call him out. Or at
least he says.
He's clickbaiting. He says he's Yevgeny. Clickbait. He's been here since 2032, though. I'm telling you, this channel must be long-lived then if we're still around in 2032. I'm writing this thing into the presidency at that point. But with that, it's good to hear that you have been here since 2023, apparently, if we reverse the numbers correctly. And interesting to hear that we've had Nutsack with us the whole time. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Bobo Yuzawa, who says, how many civilians are left in Bakhmut?
Not many from what we understand. I believe it's around
less than 3,000.
Yeah, it's less than 3,000. So not a large amount at all compared to their original population of 71,000. So with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
All right. And up next, we have a question from AA or Not, who says, if the Russian government were to collapse after they fail in the war, do you think NATO would have to intervene in Russia to some degree to secure the WMDs?
We probably would. If it got really bad, we would probably step in and intervene. It would probably end up... I don't like referencing movies because it always seems like the stupidest thing to do. But if any of y'all have ever watched the movie Red Tide, where it's a fictional story about the Russian Federation breaking up after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, and there's a breakaway region here in Vladivostok, and they actually gain control of some of the nuclear weapons there, and it's feared that they'll use them against the United States. So the submarine gets the order to prepare the fire of the nukes at a certain amount of time, and then they lose communications with the Department of Defense. So then there's a whole mutiny situation on board where they have to decide whether they're going to launch the nukes or not, or await for further orders. Situations like that could possibly arise if the Russians were destabilized enough that breakaway regions start to pop up and dissent becomes common. That could be something that we are looking at. But in the sense of that movie, though, the way it happened in that movie, unlikely, and that was a little bit fictitious. But the actual, I guess you could say, diplomatic situation it would create, that would be realistic. So with that, I hope that does address that question fairly well. And also, yeah, it's Crimson Tide. Yeah, it's Crimson Tide. I don't know if I said that. I think I did, but if I didn't, it's Crimson Tide. Roll Tide. And so with that, I hope that does answer that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Dan Neisch, who says, how did these casualty numbers compare to U.S. leaked intel?
The casualty numbers compared to U.S. leaked intel, at least according to the classified documents, is way off. It's off by nearly 130,000 Russians killed. The problem, however, with those classified documents is that the losses in that category are so low that compared to the confirmed armored and vehicular losses, there's no way in hell the Russians have only taken 45,000 dead, because that means that half of all of the deaths that have been sustained during this war came from the armor alone. And there's no way in hell that's the ratio. So I would have to say the numbers on that classified document are probably low, even on an honest statement. And also, government officials have come out here in the United States and said that the Russians have lost well over 100,000 Russians killed. And, why in the world would they sit there and say something like that when their classified information completely contradicts that? So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Judy Wilson, who says, Enforcer Matt, do you think the war will end this year? And before the Enforcer answers it for his part, in my opinion, I think this is going to be a very prolonged war, and it probably will not end this year. It'll probably go on for many more years. But that's just my speculation. And Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to kind of agree with Matthew at this point. This war may be going on for a very long time, at least from what we're seeing right now. So I wouldn't be expecting any more for it to be a short war. I would expect for this to be a somewhat long war that may last another year or two, at least. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question fairly well. And another thing is that we are coming up to the midsummer window where we thought last year the war would probably be ending by this point, and we see no sign of it ending anytime soon. So that window was incorrect. That's why crystal balling is never a good thing to do, because it will turn out wrong. And so I guess that it would at least go on another year or two. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to I'm Jeremy Bear, who says, will the U.S. really intercede if China attacks Taiwan?
Will the U.S. intervene if China attacks Taiwan? Most likely,
Yep.
because TSMC is strategically important to the United States, and we have to defend American interests in Taiwan, pretty much, the best way to explain it. Or, as people put it a little bit earlier on another show, it's just a breakaway province of China, never really had any kind of legitimacy, so who cares? That was the goofiest thing I've ever heard. I've never heard anything like that. It's like I understand if people don't really understand the topic of Taiwan and China, but you know, if you're giving someone a platform to talk to hundreds of thousands of people, and the official standpoint that everyone's almost agreeing on is that Taiwan is just a breakaway province from China, it's like, do y'all even know history or anything about this? You know, it's like, it would probably be good to read up a little bit of history before you come in here saying stuff like that, because it's like, that's just completely baseless. But anyways, with that, we're on to the next one.
All right. And the next question goes to Bobo Uzala once again, who says, do you think Zelensky and Ukraine will be running NATO in 10 years? And no.
no, not at all. So with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well. And
also, Zelensky shouldn't even be the president in 10 years, because that would mean his term limits would have hit by then.
Yes, and also he said he would be a one-term president. So if he's president of Ukraine in 10 years, that would be kind of a little weird. So I would say no. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Fern Joseph, who says, we do have to think about the fact that the Chinese economy might collapse by 2030.
And it's possible. But one thing that's always a little interesting, though, is that people take the Chinese economy will collapse to mean the country just ceases to exist. And historically, that never happens. Like in the Great Depression, the United States had an unemployment rate of something like 30%. 1 in every 3 people in this country were unemployed. That is incredibly high. I mean, what's considered high nowadays is like a 7% unemployment rate on average. 5% is considered good. 30%, 33%, that's considered unbelievable. And that didn't destroy the United States. We actually came out of the Great Depression far stronger than we did entering the Great Depression. So, you know, like the Chinese probably will have a massive economic depression that destabilizes their country by 2030, but it's not going to make China cease to exist, most likely. There's probably going to be a very dark time in China's history where there's uprisings and the government starts violently putting them down, and maybe the government gets a lot more, I guess you could say, westernized after that. You know, it starts being a lot more democratized, I guess you could say, but we probably won't see that the Chinese just completely collapse and disintegrate, because a lot of people in the modern world work off of silly notions that things can just end. You know, like when the disease came around 2 years ago, a lot of people, hell, I think everyone in the world for a couple of months thought that the governments of the world would just collapse and the world was going to just enter anarchy and have no semblance of control. No matter how bad things get, even in the middle of a nuclear exchange and afterwards, the governments of countries would still most likely continue to exist and continue to exert some kind of power over the area that they control. I mean, that is a given. I don't, like, one thing I'll say is that one thing that annoys me is when people get into the idea of bug out kits. You know, and this is like,
come on, man.
Okay, listen, I know you have one, but here's my thing, though. The entire world, there's never been a time in history where people have been able to remain self-sufficient entirely on their own. Like, even like the people who are known, like, for example, the Unabomber, who were supposedly self-sufficient, they didn't cut down the timber to build to build that cabin. They didn't make the tin for that roof. They had to go and buy that from somewhere else, and so a whole factory was involved in producing those tin sheets and cutting down that lumber where it could be used like that. You know, there's no.
But the bug out kit though is designed to help you get to a place that's safe. It's like supplies that you need to be able to get to some place.
But where's safe at that point? Like if the whole world's collapsed, there's nothing that's safe. I mean, your house is probably the safest place still.
I mean, yeah. Well, obviously, I'm not going to say that on the stream, but I mean, we could go out to some place out in the rural area.
Well, yeah, but is that really safe? Because, like, imagine how many people from the city are going to be running out into the rural area with a gun, you know, aiming on killing each other.
Well, look, at least you have like you can shoot a deer, fry it up, cook it.
Yeah, but I mean,
you could kill some animals. Like where we're at in Birmingham here, we're not going to be finding too many like animals to eat. Let's put it that way.
But here's the thing though. To me though, for as long as people have been around, there's never been such a thing as a completely self-sufficient person where it's just one person living on their own. If there are people like that, they're very small groups of outliers that still rely on society to a point to buy and sell things with to get some of the things they can't produce. But I mean, like, hell, even 10,000 years ago, which is as far back as we can ever find archaeological records of people, they lived in communities still. They lived in little villages and things like that, and they revolved around living in a community. Like, there's just... Like, you know, I don't know what it is with people nowadays that just acting like the whole world will collapse and they'll have to rely on themselves, because never has there been a time in human history where people have not relied on a community to support each other. You know, it's just a thing that's never happened. And then now some people are going to go because that idea is kind of entrenched in a certain kind of belief, you know, that, like, now you're saying this. No, I own, like, well, no, I'm not going to say that either, because then that's kind of feeding into that whole thing, but it just doesn't make sense to me. It's kind of like detached from reality. It would be better to group up with a large group of people and try and create some kind of semblance of a small society, or at least a small governance. That would probably be the best way to go. But you can't just live on your own. There's never a recorded time in history where people just live completely on their own with no interaction with anyone else and actually succeed. But with that, anyways, that was a whole side of its own to answer a question about how China would collapse. But I just don't think China's going to collapse in the fantastic fashion we think it will. But it will still be a collapse nonetheless. Nonetheless, that'll probably shape China for the rest of history. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Richard Parnell, who says, do you agree with Ben Hodges that the key to ending the war is Ukraine reclaiming Crimea?
I would say that would be a key for at least, now if Ben Hodges is talking from an American perspective, like we do a lot on this channel when we talk about strategic interests, I'd certainly agree. That's really the only scenario where the United States ensures that we get something greatly beneficial out of this war rather than just Ukraine joining NATO. We have to have that war goal achieved from an American perspective. I think that, I think that the Ukrainians definitely need to retake it. They definitely need to try to retake it. But one thing I will never not state is that there is going to be a lot of diplomatic, almost nuclear fire coming out of Crimea once the Ukrainians get there, because the Russians want that. The Russians want the Black Sea Fleet to stay in Sevastopol. They had the Black Sea Fleet in Sevastopol for most of Russia's history, ever since they had it, around the 1700s when they invaded and took over, I believe it was the Crimean Khanate. They've had it since then. They still control it to this day. They have port basing rights, and then the Maidan kind of threw that into question. That's why they annexed it. This is a huge deal. This is really the whole reason why the war started from a Russian perspective, and so they're going to try and find some way to keep this port. But still, that doesn't mean that the Ukrainians shouldn't try and take it. That's more reason that the Ukrainians should take it, because the Russians want it so badly, and it would benefit us so greatly to have them gone from there. So I would agree with them that they certainly do need to take Crimea. So with that, I hope that answers that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
So you think it's key to retake Crimea for the war to end?
To a point, yes. For the war to end in a way that we're happy with, yes. There's.
I was about to say. Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was about to say, I think while I want Ukraine to retake Crimea, I think instead of helping the war to end, that's simply going to cause the severity of the war to heat up dramatically.
It may, because the Russians, of course, put a great significance on Crimea for the port of Sevastopol. One thing, though, is that, so many people are adamant on Crimea being retaken. It's really hard to go over why Russia wants to keep Crimea and why the war started and all that, because for some reason people don't ever want to listen to the Russians put more weight on Crimea than anything else, because that's what the whole war started for in 2014. So, it's kind of hard to say that unless if like nuclear fallout begins. But with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from, also, real quick, let's go over the poll. Do you have a bug out bag or a 72-hour survival kit? 37%, which is more than I thought, said yes, and 63% said no. So, quite a few people have a bug out bag. Apparently, Mace has a Gucci bug out bag. He just says it's worth more than his car. So, he's much more on top of things than I am, because mine is very simplistic. But Enforcer, you don't have a bug out bag, do you?
No. No. Because here's my thing. If society has collapsed to the point I have to rely on a kit I've made to survive, I'm going to die anyways at that point. That's a guarantee. It's just that I'll be prolonging my eventual death just by a little bit. I mean, that's not to be a pessimist or anything, but that's just the way it would be. Because, everyone always wants to be the self-sufficient person nowadays, but there's never been such a thing. I mean, like, even the trappers of the Wild West, which are in America, are talked about so greatly, even the cowboys and all that, they weren't that far from a town. They weren't that far from other people. I mean, hell, people didn't go out and settle the Wild West on their own. They went out in wagon trains and relied on each other as a community for support, and would usually settle down generally in the same place and create a small community. I mean, it's just the way of the world. There's really no way to survive unless if you have at least a band of people, and a band being like 10 people. That's like the minimum you would need to survive. And hell, even the trappers that went out and hunted the grizzlies, getting back to the trappers because I talked about them for a second and then dropped them, they didn't go out on their own. They usually went out in groups of like 14 to 20 people. So all of these great trappers and cowboys and, Wild West legends, they didn't go out there on their own either, because doing that is dangerous. It's very easy to die completely on your own, especially when you're talking about the wild. And so you usually want to have at least a group of people to count on. That's just a given. So like the bug out bag idea, at least from whenever I hear it, when people are like, well, if the going got rough, I'd have to live on my own. It's like, you won't live on your own for long. I mean, like, hell, a group of 4 people at that point would have an advantage over you if they were armed as well, because they could just shoot you and it's 1 against 4, and they have a numbers advantage, and you have no one to rely on.
Go ahead, if you can finish. I was trying to let you know.
You have no one to rely on, because if you get shot and you somehow kill them, you're wounded. You can't really do anything anymore, and then you just eventually die because you can't operate at full capacity. And I see Sir Sigeli saying that is not what a bug out bag is for. Then
I was just about to say that.
I'll pull it up then and research it, because from what I've understood, at least the 1 or 2 times I've ever heard someone explain a bug out bag, which was on a YouTube video, 2 separate YouTube videos, they said it was for whenever they just needed to run out and escape society and go live in the wild forever. And I was like, that won't work.
Yeah, that's it. It's just a bag to be able to get you. If you have to travel in your car and go somewhere, it's enough to keep you alive, and basically, like, you'll have preferably a gun or a weapon with you as well, so you can defend yourself on the way to your destination.
Okay,
but also, even if you don't bug out and leave your house and go somewhere else, it's still helpful even if you're staying at your house, because let's say there's like a natural disaster or something, you can break out the bug out bag and use that to, like flashlight, all the basic necessities like that.
And now that I would understand. But like the idea of just having a kit and then surviving on your own in the wild for the rest of your life, it's like I don't know about that. And I mean, hell,
that's definitely not what it's for.
Imagine all the people who have to take a certain kind of medication or they die. There's a lot of people like that now in the modern world. Those people are just dead. I mean, even if they go live in the wild or whatever, and they're able to escape the chaos of a city, they will die because they just don't have the medication. It's like the modern world, that's a whole thing of its own to talk about how, community, you have to have a community to survive. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have an $18 super chat from Hunter Stevens, and thank you very much for the support, Hunter. He says, growing up in BC, I was always told to have a bug out bag for earthquakes, floods, tsunamis,
Tsunamis?
to get to help or hold out till help arrives. Now, I did not know tsunamis were impacting that area.
And I thank you for the support, Hunter Stevens. And I would have to say that is a good reason to have a bug out bag. The thing I criticize, though, with the bug out bag is the people who sit there and act like they're going to go live in the wild on their own for like 30 years off of a bug out bag and like a tarp. Like that like makes no sense to me because I'm like that just can't happen, man. No one lives like that. No one ever lived like that in history. But I see what you're saying there. I would completely understand that. And also, I saw David L. say, did that Japanese soldier live off the land on some island for like 37 years after World War II? Kind of. He actually was on an island in the Philippines. I forgot which one it was, but he would actually attack and raid local villages and steal stuff out of it. So he was kind of living off the land a little bit, but he still had interactions with society. You know, it's one of those outliers that I'm talking about that kind of still feeds off of a society a little bit to survive. He would attack local villages, kill people, and steal their stuff, and then go running back into the mountains and go live off of those supplies for a little bit, and everything else he could find until he went starving again, and then he would come back out to a village, attack it, steal stuff, and, you know, the cycle would continue for the next 37 years, but, like that's my thing. All of the examples that everyone brings up, like Ted Kaczynski was caught. You know, although he was living completely off the grid, he was on his own. He was caught because he would have to go into town to buy a few things or mail off the bombs. And so, you know, rather than just mailing off the bombs, which obviously he had to go to the post office to do, and that's why he was in the town, he was still known to have bought a few things in the town every once in a while, although he lived in the woods and was supposedly completely self-sufficient. He wasn't, because he was buying stuff from the city. But with that, I hope that answers that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Night King, who says, could Ukrainians just bomb everything completely on Crimea and push all Russian troops into it and then blast them off of it?
They could bomb Crimea, but it will be very expensive and a huge supply drain because, you know, it's not cheap and it's not easy to make a bomb. So they could bomb it, they could do all that, but it would probably be very, very expensive. It would probably be a lot cheaper for them to just make precise strikes. So with that, I hope that does answer that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And we have another question from Jeremy, who says, do you think that Putin will use kidnapped Ukrainians as pawns in any future peace talks with Ukraine?
Probably not, because the Ukrainians also have a lot of captured Russians. So if they threaten to do anything to the Ukrainians just threaten to do stuff to the Russians they have. So it's kind of like an even playing field on that level, so you really can't threaten much in that category. And so with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well, and we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Broken Arrow, who says, is there a tank storage facility in Bakhmut?
A tank storage facility in Bakhmut? Not that I know of. I'll have to go check real quick. Let's see here. Let's see, this may be one. It's empty. It's like completely empty in this video. Well, in this satellite image. It's not a video. What am I talking about? Y'all are watching a video, though. But I can't see one, because that's the place I would think it would be. And I can't really see anything anywhere else. So I would say no, off the top of my head. But I may be wrong, and I may not be looking well enough. And so with that, I hope I answered that question fairly well. And we are on to the second to last question of the night.
I think this is the last question of the night, according to the thing.
Whoops. And so with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Lottie Reckless, who says, do the Ukrainians have enough helicopters to do an aerial assault with airborne troops to go behind enemy lines?
Reread the line.
Do the Ukrainians have enough helicopters to do an aerial assault with airborne troops to go behind enemy lines?
They do, but it would be very risky. And also, there probably wouldn't be a lot of support for them, so they'd probably end up like the VDV did at Hostomel. Probably surrounded and then destroyed for the most part. So, I would say they could do it, but it would be very risky, and they would have to have a very successful push to then relieve those forces once they take and hold an area behind the lines. Because they won't be able to survive long without supplies. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And after the whole bug out thing, which is the huge conversation in the live chat right now, we have reached the end of tonight's stream. Also, real quick to address that again, I completely get bug out bags and things like that, like disaster relief stuff, if it's for like a tornado or an earthquake or something, but I don't get when people make bug out bags with the intent of like the world collapsing and a government never coming forward or stability ever returning, and then they go live in the woods like it's like Fallout 4 or something like that. I don't get that. Like, that's just not
Man,
fun.
I love making bug out bags. It makes me feel at peace.
No, like, bug out bags are cool for that. Like, disaster relief, tornadoes, earthquakes, things like that. Like, I totally get those bug out bags. But bug out bags where people are like, oh, man, when society, you know, collapses, because for some reason it's going to collapse next year, I'm going to run out in the woods, I'm going to kill everyone, and I'm going to live out there near a creek with a tarp, you know, for like 20 years. Like, I don't get that. Like, I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. It's not logical. But anyways, wanted to clear that up before we went. It is now time for us to round out the night. I once again thank you all so much for watching. If y'all enjoyed, make sure to hit the like, comment, and subscribe, because of course we run this stream every single day of the week, 6 days a week, and you can always count on us to be here at the exact same time reporting on the news. And so with that, thank you all once again for watching. I hope you have a great night. Stay safe. Good luck. Take care, and we'll see you all tomorrow for the Sunday night fundraiser. And of course, Slava Ukraini.
And Slava Ukraine, and always pack a bug out bag wisely, please. Don't pack it with you know, don't pack it with I don't know, whatever. Good night.
The leaf spring army
Bug. Swatty.
Усміхнеться доля, згинуть наші вороженьки, як роса на сонці, запануємо ми, браття, у своїй сторонці. Тіло ми положим за нашу свободу і покажем, що ми браття козацького роду. Душу й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу і покажем, що ми браття козацького